The leaders of the three major settlements came over for a meeting. Although Xiao Ran was qualified to attend, he hated meetings more than anything. When he had a job, he had no choice, but did he need to bother with it now? Besides, if he wanted to listen in, he could just scan the area with his spatial perception. This was precisely why he didn't want to establish his own faction. It was too much trouble. He'd rather flirt with Shu Ruaji than engage in all this scheming and probing. However, he was somewhat distracted. He had split his focus to watch Wu Shanglong's negotiations with the three leaders. The three major factions were very interested in the powerful expert who had suddenly appeared on Wu Shanglong's side and wanted an introduction. Wu Shanglong naturally refused, but the three factions wouldn't give up, pestering him endlessly. Xiao Ran took a look. He had already met one of the three leaders, Jeang Yuankai of the Buyuan settlement, whose ability was wind. The leader of the Taolan settlement was named Yin Guanghao, and his ability was electricity. His most well-known power was to create a high-voltage electric grid around his body, instantly killing everything. He was a man in his 30s, about 175 centimeters tall, with a constant smile. It was hard to tell if he was naturally good-natured or a smiling tiger. Xiao Ran thought the latter was more likely. The last big shot was the only woman, named Yang Xiao. Her height was astonishing, around 180 centimeters, taller than the three men present. Yet, she didn't give off a feeling of being large and brawny, but rather tall and graceful with a fantastic figure. It was said she was a model before the cataclysm, so such a height wasn't surprising. Her ability was related to water. One of her reported powers was to directly control the blood within a person's body, causing it to erupt from their pores, resulting in a gruesome death. Yang Xiao was also very beautiful, causing the lecher Jeang Yuankai to constantly steal glances at her. This was especially true because she was dressed quite scantily, revealing her delicate collarbones and a faint hint of cleavage. It wasn't very deep. By Xiao Ran's estimation, she was a C-cup at most. Wu Shanglong handled Yin Guanghao and Jeang Yuankai with ease, but he found it difficult to deal with Yang Xiao. The woman kept leaning against him, making the retired soldier blush furiously. This was clearly a breach of etiquette. Since Wu Shanglong refused to reveal Xiao Ran's identity, the three leaders refused to leave. They stated that it was getting a bit late, and they would spend the night, hoping Wu Shanglong wouldn't mind. In fact, there were still over 2 hours until nightfall, and they were all powerful ability users. Couldn't they return to their own settlements? They were obviously unwilling to give up and wanted to search for Xiao Ran themselves. The problem was, they had never seen Xiao Ran in person. Even if he appeared right in front of them, would they be able to guess that this was the mysterious expert who had fought alongside Wu Shanglong and driven back the little Japs? Shu Ruaji walked out of the room. Xiao Ran had told her that she needed to train her ability properly, or else she would only be useful for cupping therapy in the future. She didn't want to be a useless person. It was true that she was beautiful and had a great figure, and Xiao Ran was very interested in her, always putting in a great deal of effort. But she knew very well that a relationship based on looks could not last. What would happen when she grew old and her beauty faded? Or what if Xiao Ran got tired of her before she even aged? There was no marriage to bind them now. It was too easy for a capable man to swap for a new beauty. After experiencing her husband's betrayal, Shu Ruaji was now filled with a sense of crisis. On one hand, she had become very dependent on Xiao Ran. On the other, she was desperate to grow stronger and be useful, so that Xiao Ran wouldn't give her away to someone else like her husband did. She had an ability, but her lack of skill meant she was only slightly stronger than an ordinary person. Driven by this sense of crisis, she was filled with ambition. There were many ability users here, so she wasn't worried about causing shock or unease by using her powers. Besides, the soldier brothers were very trustworthy. Even if she hadn't believed it before, seeing Wang Tai and the others willing to sacrifice themselves to save Wu Shanglong showed how sincere these retired soldiers were. Could such a thing happen in any other settlement? Shu Ruaji raised her hand, and a fireball shot out. She currently had about 10 units of power, which wasn't strong, but not weak either. Boom, boom, boom. She threw one fireball after another, practicing the speed and accuracy of her attacks. A short, fat man opened a window and walked out. His lustful gaze swept over Shu Ruaji's graceful and charming body, and he couldn't help but feel a stir of desire. Sister-in-law, so you're here. It was Jeang Yuankai. Shu Ruaji had a strong psychological trauma associated with this man. Without even turning her head, she recognized his voice. Her delicate body trembled, and she turned around with some difficulty. Sure enough, the face from her nightmares appeared before her eyes. Haha, It's true what they say. Diligently plant a flower and it may not bloom, yet an unintentionally planted willow may grow to provide shade. Jeang Yuankai revealed a vulgar smile. No, that's not right. I'm definitely going to plant this flower of yours. Hearing his crude words, Shu Ruaji's face turned pale, but she mustered her courage. This isn't your territory. Don't you dare try anything. Try anything? Jeang Yuankai chuckled. How did you know that's my favorite thing to do? TSK, dear sister-in-law, I haven't had a taste of you yet. Not to mention how beautiful you are. Just your status alone will make it extra exciting when I'm doing you. Shu Ruaji's face grew even paler. She hadn't expected Jeang Yuankai to be so audacious, acting so arrogantly even in Wu Shanlong's territory. What should she do? Jeang Yuankai, that's enough. Wu Shanlong's figure appeared, speaking coldly to Jeang Yuankai. Who gave you the nerve to act like a hooligan on my territory? Jeang Yuankai laughed loudly. Boss Wu, to be honest, this is my sister-in-law. We're family. So, this is our family business. It's not that I'm not giving you face. Wu Shanlong was slightly stunned and looked over at Shu Ruaji. Shu Ruaji immediately shook her head. I don't want to go with him. Wu Shanlong smiled reassuringly. Don't worry. As long as you're unwilling, no one can force you. After speaking, he looked at Jeang Yuankai coldly. You can get lost now. Jeang Yuankai was naturally furious. Wu Shanlong, you bastard, this is my sister-in-law, and you're telling me I can't take her, he said menacingly. Are you trying to get besieged by the 3 major factions? The threat in his words was palpable. If you don't let me take this woman today, then you'll face attacks from the little Japs, Shen Mingfei, and me. Even if you have a mysterious and powerful helper, can you withstand another major faction? So, are you going to protect one woman or your entire settlement? Wu Shanlong's gaze turned cold. Did this man only have interests in his eyes without a shred of national or ethnic righteousness? When it came to internal power struggles, you could beat each other's brains out, but when facing an external enemy, you don't even consider presenting a united front. Could one really cooperate with the little Japs? Right now, they didn't have the ability to sweep through High City, but once a breach was made and the balance was broken, they would surely wipe out all the forces in the city. At that time, even if you wanted to be their dogs, the little Japs might not agree. Only ordinary people could be dogs and slaves. Ability users? They would definitely be killed, their abilities plundered to make the little Japs stronger and maintain their advantage, ensuring that the Chinese people will be subjugated for generations, never able to rise again. You're a real piece of shit. Wu Shanlong's expression grew colder, his anger mounting. Bursts of heat erupted from his body, showing the astonishing level of his fury. Get lost. Don't make me say it a second time, he said grimly. Fine, fine. Jeang Yuankai was extremely arrogant. Then Wu Shanlong, we'll see about this. He turned to leave. He had originally planned to stay the night, but now that was clearly impossible. I won't see you out. Wu Shanlong flicked his sleeve. Jeang Yuankai snorted and strode away. Boss Zhang was extremely displeased. He had long coveted this beautiful and charming sister-in-law. At her wedding, he had wanted to feign drunkenness and take some liberties under the guise of teasing the bride, but he was scared off by Shu Ruaji. He had thought he could only fantasize about this beautiful sister-in-law in his dreams, never being able to touch her. But to his surprise, the cataclysm had arrived, and he had become a major power in one fell swoop. For him, these past 100-plus days, aside from the food being a bit worse, were far better than before. Women? He could have them whenever he wanted, even 2, 5, or 10 at a time. Were there any police to arrest him? A few days ago, he had unexpectedly found Zhang Rongmin's family and once again saw this beautiful sister-in-law. With just a little pressure, his handsome and successful cousin, who had always been the model child, caved and obediently offered up his wife. But what was the result? The woman was not afraid of death and ran off into the bitter cold. Although he found her later, a mysterious man intervened. Being an extremely cautious person, he had decisively retreated after one failed move. No matter, he was certain he could have a taste of this tender morsel. He hadn't expected to meet Shu Ruaji here again, only to be blocked by this brute, Wu Shanlong. Wu Shanlong. Jeang Yuankai felt a headache coming on. That guy was like a stubborn rock in a latrine, stinky and hard. Since Wu Shanlong had refused once, he would refuse 10 times, 100 times. It was impossible to make him change his mind. Can I only cooperate with the little Japs? He muttered to himself. He had no sense of patriotism or national sentiment, so he had no psychological burden about cooperating with the Japs. But he was afraid that this cooperation might end up with him being consumed. After all, Among the 6 major factions in High City, the little Japs were the strongest. Damn it, Shan Long, you're forcing my hand. He gritted his teeth, having made up his mind. If Shun Mingfei can cooperate, why can't I? As long as Shun Mingfei and I reach a secret agreement, can't we turn around and devour the little Japs in the end? His eyes lit up. Although making a deal with a tiger was dangerous, he was no saint. Even if he wasn't a lion, he was at least a leopard, right? Suddenly, a strong sense of crisis welled up inside him. His instincts reacted faster than his conscious mind, and he transformed into a gust of clear wind. Then, his form reappeared. "Who's there?" he roared. Then, the ambusher didn't appear. Instead, an unstoppable force pushed him in a certain direction, a direction that once again triggered a strong sense of crisis. He transformed into wind again, scattering in all directions. Then he decided not to reform his human shape and activated his second ability. Instantly, subtle streams of wind flowed within a 500-meter radius, and Jeang Yuankai used these streams as feelers to explore the area. Wherever the wind could reach, he could perceive it like a bat's ultrasound. Found him. Jeang Yuankai flew over as a gust of wind, then transformed into a semi-human state. He was vaguely recognizable as a human figure, but he was formed from condensed wind, and his body was absurdly long. His feet were outside, while his upper body was inside a room, connected by a thin stream of wind. "It's you," Jeang Yuankai roared immediately. "The man who had interfered and taken Shu Ruaji. I haven't even settled the score with you, and you dare to ambush me first?" His malice surged. With a wave of his hand, 5 wind blades slashed toward Xiao Ran. He hadn't fought Xiao Ran over a woman before, because he cherished his own life more. But now that the man was practically taunting him to his face, how could he endure it? However, the 5 visible wind blades were just a feint. The real killing move was low pressure, he said coldly, instantly sucking away the air around Xiao Ran. The imbalance between the internal and external pressure of a human body would cause you to instantly implode. However, this move had no effect. Xiao Ran was completely fine. Moreover, the 5 wind blades passed through Xiao Ran's body without causing any damage. "You're not a physical entity?" Jeang Yuankai frowned, but immediately shook his head. He was solid, because not only had he seen Xiao Ran with his eyes, but he had also detected him with his wind. An illusion could deceive his eyes, but not his wind feelers. "Who the hell are you?" he said coldly. "A dog killer," Xiao Ran said faintly. In fact, he had discovered Jeang Yuankai when he was about to make a move on Shu Ruaji. He just knew that Shan Long was a man who prioritized the bigger picture. Even when Shun Mingfei had become a traitor, Shan Long had first fought Odiri. Kill Jeang Yuankai in the settlement? Shan Long wouldn't help. He would only try to mediate. Soldiers, upright and unyielding, but also stubbornly annoying. Xiao Ran decided to just set up an ambush here. It was perfect. He felt that killing the little Japs was a bit difficult, as his strength wasn't enough to crush them, and he could only kill small fry each time. But if he could absorb Jeang Yuankai's ability, his strength would surely soar, making it much easier to kill the little Japs. "You're the damn dog," Jeang Yuankai cursed, but he didn't attack at all. Instead, he turned into a gust of wind and fled. Jeang Yuankai's weakness was his cowardice. He lacked the courage of a true leader. However, his strength was precisely his caution. He would never make a move without absolute certainty. Even though Xiao Ran had stolen the woman he had his eyes on, and even though Xiao Ran had ambushed him, when he found that his ultimate move was useless against Xiao Ran, he decisively chose to flee. He decided to ally with Shun Mingfei and then cooperate with the little Japs. When he returned, after killing Shan Long and Xiao Ran, he and Shun Mingfei would each absorb one of their abilities. Or better yet, he would absorb both of their abilities himself. After all, he was a wind-type ability user. With his extreme burst speed, even a physical-type user of the same level would be forced to submit. It seemed like a deal with a tiger, but the chances of success were actually very high. By then, he would be the #1 expert in High City. He could then turn around and take out Odiri and Shun Mingfei, completely solidifying his position as king. Even if Yin Guanghao and Yang Xiuxiu joined forces, so what? He could suppress them with one hand. Didn't that slut Yang Xiuxiu always look down on him? At that time, this short, fat, uncultured man would pin her to the ground and take her fiercely. A toad can't eat swan meat? He was determined to eat it, and eat it for sure. With these thoughts, he quickly departed. Xiao Ran gave chase, but frowned. This Jeang Yuankai was too cautious, flying to an altitude of several hundred meters. At such a distance, he could only hit him with something like a sonic rebar. But with Jeang Yuankai now transformed into wind, would a sonic rebar even hurt him? What a cowardly rat, running away at the first sign of fight. I can't let him get away. Xiao Ran fired a sonic rebar into the sky. It quickly flew about 100 meters, and he immediately locked onto it. This was sonic speed. In the past, he couldn't have done it, but now, with over 7,000 times enhancement, capturing a sonic speed object was basically no problem. He was now in the air, but still nearly 400 meters away from Jeang Yuankai. Again, he fired a second sonic rebar. The 100-meter distance took less than 0.3 seconds, and he performed a second spatial swap. He was another 100 meters closer to Jeang Yuankai. Holy crap! Jeang Yuankai turned his head and was shocked to see Xiao Ran using an incredibly bizarre method to flash jump into the air, rapidly closing the distance between them. What the hell are you? He wasn't so shocked that he lost his composure. After all, he was a top-tier expert. He just didn't want to take unnecessary risks. Go bang! A fierce wind erupted from his body, turning into a powerful force that propelled him forward at a speed far exceeding sound. This was a burst skill that wouldn't last more than a few minutes, but it was enough to shake Xiao Ran off. A sonic rebar wasn't even as fast as him. If Xiao Ran were on the ground, he could still swap with other objects and not lose him. But by the time he descended from the sky to the ground, Jeang Yuankai had already fled beyond the range of his spatial perception. He was now possibly at 3 or even 5 times the speed of sound. How long would it take to cover a distance of over 7 kilometers? That guy must be heading to the Black Dragon Society. Xiao Ran glanced at the sky. It would be dark in half an hour at most, and a thick fog would follow. Perfect. I'll just start today's harassment right now. Xiao Ran headed towards the Black Dragon Society. Jeang Yuankai soon arrived at the Black Dragon Society, but he didn't rush in. He had just used his ultimate move and couldn't use it again for a short time. And what kind of place was the Black Dragon Society? A den of wolves that would devour you whole. Of course, he had to be fully prepared before entering. So, he found a place nearby to rest and recover. Half an hour later, just as the sky darkened, a thick fog quickly enveloped the world. Having recovered to his peak state, he headed towards the Black Dragon Society. The fog? He was a wind-type ability user, and his strength was even greater than that of the Black Dragon Society's general. If even that person could blow away the fog, what more him? However, Jeang Yuankai didn't disperse the fog. Instead, he used the wind as feelers and quietly approached the Black Dragon Society. He flew directly in, but before he could announce his identity, ding, 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 the clear sound of bells suddenly rang out. Immediately, figures rushed out of the buildings, and searchlights swept around, quickly locking onto him. Chao Xining Dai. Countless attacks followed. Damn it, you got the wrong guy. I'm not some Chao Xining. Jeang Yuankai didn't have time to explain. He could only transform into a clear wind. Countless attacks passed through his wind-form body, and he immediately reformed, his face somewhat pale. While in his wind form, he could be immune to a lot of damage, but the more attacks he took and the more powerful they were, the more of his ability was consumed. Just that one volley had cost him a quarter of his power. Before, when Xiao Ran opened his domain, he had instantly lost 6 or 7% of his ability. Could transforming into wind be compared to a spatial domain? So, it was understandable that he consumed a large amount of power at once. A few more rounds like that, and he'd be done for. Stop! I'm not Chao Xining, he shouted. To show his sincerity, he even raised his hands. Odiri walked out, gestured with his hand, and said in broken Chinese, "So it's Mr. Zhang. What brings you here so late?" Jeang Yuankai had just opened his mouth when his body bizarrely vanished. Thud! A small stone fell onto the snow where he had been standing. Chao Xining. Odiri and the others shouted in unison, then began searching the surroundings. Jeang Yuankai felt his vision blur, and he found himself inside a building. The man standing in front of him was none other than Xiao Ran. "You're like a persistent ghost. You actually follow me here." Without a second word, he was about to transform into wind and retreat at high speed. He had heard the shouts of Odiri and the others outside, and knew he hadn't left the Black Dragon Society. So, why should he face Xiao Ran alone? Let's all attack together and kill this bastard. However, although he had transformed into wind, he found that he couldn't fly out. He was confined to the room. How could this be? Change back. Xiao Ran snorted. Within his domain, he was like a god. The last time, it was because there were too many little Japs and their attacks were too dense, causing the spatial domain to consume an explosive amount of power, which was why Xiao Ran hadn't used it. It didn't mean the spatial domain wasn't powerful. Now, one-on-one, Xiao Ran didn't believe he couldn't handle this guy. Odiri and his men would find him soon, but he should have a few seconds. A strange scene occurred. Jeang Yuankai began to transform from his wind form back into a solid entity. He was clearly not doing it willingly. His face was filled with terror. If he turned back into a solid, he would no longer be immune to damage. He would die. "Help!" he screamed. What was dignity when his life was on the line? He, Jeang Yuankai, had never been one to care about face. However, Jeang Yuankai's shouts couldn't be heard outside. Within the domain, whether he could make a sound depended on Xiao Ran's permission. Obviously, Xiao Ran did not agree. Although Odiri and the others would find him soon, every second counted. Xiao Ran whispered. The part of Jeang Yuankai's body that had solidified rapidly vanished, disassembled into cells. But Jeang Yuankai didn't die. Did he have to be fully solidified first? Otherwise, no matter how finely you broke down the wind, would the wind die? Obviously not. Xiao Ran exerted his full power, rapidly forcing Jeang Yuankai to solidify. No, no, no. Jeang Yuankai let out a roar that even he couldn't hear, his expression one of utter terror. However, his body was irreversibly transforming back into a solid entity. Arms, legs, torso, head. Boom! Just then, Odiri burst through the wall. He had already entered his beast form, with huge wings spread on his back, a samurai sword in hand. Cursing, his eyes filled with viciousness, he swung his sword. The blade's light was blinding. This slash completely disregarded Jeang Yuankai's life. All that mattered was that Xiao Ran died. Xiao Ran opened a spatial gate and absorbed the sword light. But just then, Sakurada Keiko also charged in. Boom! She broke through another wall, and a massive fist of ice came smashing over. Xiao Ran frowned. Because they were indoors, he could only open a very small spatial gate, just enough to take an Odiri's attack. But Sakurada Keiko's punch was enormous. Part of it landed in the spatial gate, while the other part was outside. What did this mean? The frame of the spatial gate had been hit. The spatial gate could absorb any attack, but its edge could not. Xiao Ran had experimented. If the edge was hit, it would cause a huge backlash. This was also why he had been afraid of missile strikes before. The blast wave was too wide, far exceeding the size of the spatial gate, and the backlash would be terrifying. Xiao Ran's whole body trembled. He felt as if a steel nail had been brutally driven into his head, and the pain made him want to vomit blood. His face instantly turned pale, but he didn't relax his suppression of Jeang Yuankai in the slightest, continuing to force him to solidify. He was about to succeed. Odiri's eyes lit up as if he had discovered something. What was he most afraid of in Xiao Ran's abilities? It was that invisible net that seemed to be able to take away any attack, even people. Once a person was caught in the net, they were as good as dead. But now, he saw the weakness of this ability. The net had a size limit. As long as the attack exceeded the net's capacity, it couldn't be taken away. On the contrary, it would cause a considerable backlash against Xiao Ran. He had finally found a way to deal with this Chinese man. He snorted and slashed out. The blade's light was long, filling the entire room and sweeping towards Xiao Ran in a vast wave. He had previously only used a meter-long blade of light because the smaller the light, the more concentrated the power, and thus the greater the force. But to break Xiao Ran's ability, he chose to use this large-scale attack. How can I miss out on such excitement? Shen Mingfei's voice rang out. He suddenly appeared, following the blade of light to attack Xiao Ran. His intention to take advantage of the situation clear as day. He wanted to be the one to absorb Xiao Ran's ability. Obviously, the spatial gate was no longer usable. The indoor environment severely limited this ability's effectiveness. Xiao Ran decided not to use it, simply maintaining the operation of his spatial domain. The blade of light slashed in and was instantly disintegrated. Shen Mingfei immediately halted. Such a fierce blade of light had been disintegrated in an instant. He didn't want to touch it with his own body. Even if he was in his beast form, his body was even harder than steel. Xiao Ran felt his ability being drained sharply, but he ignored it, focusing all his strength on forcing Jeang Yuankai to reveal himself. Quick, speed up the attack. Don't let this bastard succeed. Odiri shouted. If Xiao Ran forced Jeang Yuankai into a solid state, he could naturally kill him. Without a doubt, Xiao Ran's strength would soar. He slashed again and quickly closed in. Shen Mingfei also realized this. Gritting his teeth, he let out a sudden roar. Roar! This sound was like a lion's roar, the sound waves becoming visible to the naked eye as they rushed toward Xiao Ran. This was his ultimate move, terrifyingly powerful, but also extremely draining. After the roar, there was a full half-second of weakness. However, as long as Odiri followed up with another slash, he could break free from the weakened state and be back to full strength. Xiao Ran still didn't use any other abilities, just maintaining the operation of his spatial domain with all his might. The incoming attacks were all disintegrated, but his ability consumption dropped sharply again. However, Jeang Yuankai had also completely solidified. In the next instant, the man vanished from before everyone's eyes, disassembled to the cellular level. Xiao Ran made a grasping motion with his hand, and a warm current flowed into him. Success! Shan Mingfei was naturally anxious and afraid. The previous Xiao Ran was already so difficult to deal with, let alone one who had absorbed Jeang Yuankai's ability and had his strength greatly increased. But now he couldn't even escape, stuck in a half-second weakened state. At that moment, Odiri finally arrived. Shan Mingfei had just turned his head to call out when he saw a sharp blade of light filling his vision. He was horrified. Odiri was going to kill him. He had planned this all along, which was why he had deliberately let him use his ultimate move. This man had never intended to kill Xiao Ran. His real target was him. No, Odiri's ambition was greater than that. He wanted to take out him, Xiao Ran, and Jeang Yuankai all at once. That was the best outcome. If not, he was the backup plan. If Xiao Ran absorbed Jeang Yuankai's ability, Odiri would absorb his, so he wouldn't be weaker than Xiao Ran. What a brilliant plan. The little Japs were truly treacherous. At that moment, he was filled with regret. Why did he cooperate with the little Japs? Historically, the little Japs were a treacherous nation, adhering to minor courtesies but lacking major righteousness. How could he have been so blind as to cooperate with this group of devils? The sword entered his body, instantly severing his life force. He was thoroughly dead. Odiri moved like lightning, grabbing Shan Mingfei's body. He was afraid Xiao Ran would intercept him. Sure enough, as a warm current flowed into his body, Shan Mingfei's corpse suddenly turned into a small stone. Ha ha ha! Odiri laughed loudly. A terrifying energy circulated within him. He felt an incredible power flowing through his body. He slashed again, and a terrifying blade of light filled the entire room. Xiao Ran frowned. He activated a spatial swap and appeared outside the house. Fighting indoors limited the spatial gate too much. Moreover, the spatial gate was still trembling from Sakurada Keiko's punch, which greatly affected his performance. He had persisted before to seize Jeang Yuankai's ability, but now that he had it, he felt the spatial gate was severely damaged. He couldn't fight anymore. He needed to recover properly. Xiao Ran no longer sought battle. He continued to use spatial swaps, and with a few whooshes, he disappeared into the thick fog. Xiao Ran arrived at the hotel where Odiri's family was staying. He got straight to it, and, after a satisfying session, he left without a trace of emotion. He didn't leave a single bit of food. They were little Japs, after all. If they died, they died. Considering the evil deeds of the Black Dragon Society, Xiao Ran's methods were far too gentle in comparison. Of course, there was another reason Xiao Ran didn't kill them. Spares. What if he needed them in the future? He could vent his anger on the little Japs without any mercy or restraint. However, the most important thing was to kill Odiri and the other little Japs. As long as they weren't eliminated, more people would be tormented and killed by them. Right? I need to quickly digest this gain and heal my injuries. My head hurts so much. Before dawn, Xiao Ran returned to the Zhenghan settlement. He immediately found Wu Shanglong. Xiao Ran didn't hide anything. He recounted the events of the previous night, chasing Jeang Yuankai, entering the Black Dragon Society, and Odiri killing Shan Mingfei. Of course, he omitted the details of how he dealt with the side effects. He was afraid that the straight-laced retired soldier might consider the little Japs family as civilians and believe that the crime shouldn't extend to them, potentially turning against him. Although the possibility was low, there was no need to mention it. After listening, Wu Shanglong's thick brows furrowed tightly. This was bad. After Odiri absorbed Shan Mingfei's ability, he would definitely be the top expert in High City. And with one side weakened and the other strengthened, the gap was compounded. Odiri is a beast type, so he needs time for his body to fully absorb the ability and for the enhancement to complete. So, we have 3 days, Wu Shanglong said thoughtfully. After 3 days, Odiri's strength will reach its peak. Xiao Ran nodded. On this point, beast types and physical types were the same. They relied on their physical strength, speed, and other attributes. Unlike Xiao Ran, who was more of a spellcaster type. His combat power wasn't affected even if his body wasn't fully enhanced. After absorbing an ability, the power of abilities like spatial compression was instantly maximized. I'll go find Yin Guanghao and Yang Xiuxiu immediately and tell them to prepare to fight Odiri together. Wu Shanlong added. Since the two leaders hadn't left yesterday, they were conveniently still here, saving him a trip. You don't look well. Are you injured? Wu Shanlong had just stood up when he looked at Xiao Ran with concern. Xiao Ran possessed the strength of a major power and was the key to them being able to resist the Black Dragon Society. If they lost this combatant, they might as well not even think about how to deal with Odiri and just evacuate High City immediately. Yeah, I'm a little injured. I'll be fine after some rest, Xiao Ran said, his face pale. You should go rest immediately, Wu Shanlong said. Although he wished he could have a decisive battle with Odiri right away, as every day of delay meant Odiri would grow stronger, he absolutely could not be without his main force, Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran nodded again. He really needed to rest and recover now. Not his body, but his spirit. Wu Shanlong left, and he returned to his room. Shu Ruaji had been waiting up for him and was relieved to see him return. But she immediately noticed his exhaustion. After getting into bed, he fell into a deep sleep. She placed his head on her ample bosom, as if trying to soothe his fatigue this way. But even in his deep sleep, Xiao Ran's hands seemed to have a mind of their own, each one gripping a key point. Shu Ruaji was speechless. It was a habit. Just what kind of extravagant life had this guy been living to be so naturally accustomed to this? Xiao Ran was truly injured. The spatial gate seemed invincible, able to absorb any attack, but its edge was a weak point. After being struck hard by Sarada Keiko, the spatial gate had been trembling and even could no longer be released. This was more serious than he had imagined. Furthermore, his mind was connected to the spatial gate. That punch, although it hadn't hit his body, had caused a backlash through the gate, inflicting severe damage to his spirit. His head was still throbbing with sharp, piercing pains. Before, he had been focused on killing the enemy, single-mindedly wanting to absorb Jeang Yuankai's ability. Afterward, he had been affected by the side effects and ignored the intense pain. But now, an immense agony washed over him, making him indescribably uncomfortable. His hands unconsciously tightened, as if grabbing something, but he had no mind to spare for anything else, only letting out soft groans of pain. Shu Ruaji was in misery. She was being gripped so tightly it hurt, but after the pain, she actually felt herself reacting and her face flushed red. I must be addicted to this man, to feel desire in such a situation. How shameful. Wu Shanlong went to find Yin Guanghao and Yang Xiuxiu and told them about Shun Mingfei's death and his ability being absorbed by Odiri. This made the other two leaders turn pale with shock. Odiri's strength was already above theirs, though the difference was limited. But now, with Shun Mingfei's ability added to his, he could sweep through High City. What should they do? I need to go back immediately and take my people to leave High City. Yang Xiuxiu said at once. The world is big. It's not like I have to stay in High City. Yin Guanghao, on the other hand, was deep in thought, not making an immediate decision. Wu Shanlong had no faith in Yin Guanghao at all. The man was a notorious smiling tiger who loved to stab people in the back with a smile on his face. Expecting such a person to have a sense of national righteousness? Impossible. He could only try to persuade Yang Xiuxiu. Boss Yang, although Odiri has become stronger, we also have a new expert here, the very Xiao Ran you've been wanting to meet. Last night, Jeang Yuankai went to the Black Dragon Society to cooperate with Odiri, but he was killed by Xiao Ran inside the Black Dragon Society. This made both Yin Guanghao and Yang Xiuxiu's expressions change. How powerful! You mean Jeang Yuankai was killed by Xiao Ran, and his ability was also taken by Xiao Ran? Yin Guanghao confirmed. To boost their confidence, Wu Shanlong nodded. That's right. Yin Guanghao's eyes darted around. All right then, with a strong expert like Boss Xiao as our backer, we can naturally fight the little Japs. In that case, I'll go back to my settlement immediately and bring everyone over. This was naturally the right thing to do. He was a lone wolf. Yang Xiuxiu also nodded. Then I'll go back and bring my people over too. From now on, our three factions will advance and retreat together. Let's wipe out the Black Dragon Society first. Wu Shanlong slammed the table. Boss Yang, you said it perfectly. This is our China. When did it become the turn of these devils to rule? Yin Guanghao seemed to be daydreaming and was startled by the slam, almost jumping out of his skin. All right then, we're off. We'll be back soon. The two leaders left. Wu Shanlong had one of his men monitor the Black Dragon Society. This subordinate was, of course, an ability user who could condense his ability into the form of birds or beasts, able to travel up to 10 kilometers away. Whatever he saw and heard would be synchronously transmitted to his mind, making him the best scout. Unfortunately, the bird or beast form he released could only last for half an hour, so he couldn't monitor the little Japs around the clock. Half a day passed, and Yang Xiao was the first to arrive with her people. They were all young. Not a single one was old. This was a cruel reality. Which strong person would take in the elderly? Besides, it was difficult for the elderly to survive in such an apocalyptic world. Because Yang Xiao was a woman, her subordinates were also mostly women. Birds of a feather flocked together. It couldn't be helped. They waited and waited, but the sun was about to set, and Ying Guanghao still hadn't arrived with his people. Could the Black Dragon Society have attacked them? Wu Shanlong and Yang Xiao looked at each other, their faces showing alarm. If Odiri absorbed Ying Guanghao's ability as well, could he still be matched? Unless they had heaven-defying luck and a large amount of golden snowflakes fell for them to obtain, how could they turn around such a disadvantageous situation? But it was about to get dark, and they couldn't go looking for Ying Guanghao. They wouldn't even reach his place before nightfall. Besides, they couldn't just abandon their own settlement, could they? At that moment, the scout Wu Shanlong had sent out returned. Any movement from the little devils? Wu Shanlong asked. The scout shook his head. No. If there were, I would have definitely come back to report. Wu Shanlong nodded. Otherwise, what would be the point of sending a scout? He looked at Yang Xiao and sighed. It seems Ying Guanghao has tricked us all. He never intended to fight alongside us. He took his people and left High City. It was very likely. He just took a few of his most trusted subordinates and fled. Traveling light, they could probably reach the neighboring city of Zhujiangjia in a day, spend a night, and then go to Hangzhou. And after that, they could go anywhere in the country. For ability users, the low temperatures were no longer a major issue. It was only the thick fog at night that would make them lose their way. It was impossible to travel at night. They were very likely to end up going in the wrong direction. It was better to rest well and move during the day. Yang Xiao was also stunned. Ying Guanghao was so spineless, and he didn't even say a word. That bastard really has a good plan, using us to hold back the Black Dragon Society to buy himself enough time to escape. Yang Xiao said angrily. Wu Shanlong was speechless. Ying Guanghao was unworthy of being a faction leader, to flee in the face of battle. What now? Could they still fight the Black Dragon Society? They probably could. Although Odiri's strength had greatly increased, Xiao Ran had also absorbed Jeang Yuankai's ability and was not inferior. So, the key now was Xiao Ran. He was injured, and it was unknown when he would recover. Odiri only needed 3 days for his body's enhancement to complete. We came to kill them. What if Xiao Ran still hadn't recovered his combat strength? What then? They would be wiped out by the Black Dragon Society. If it were anyone else, they would definitely keep such worries to themselves. Wouldn't saying it out loud affect morale? But Wu Shanlong was not that kind of person. He directly stated this possibility. Yang Xiao was stunned for a moment, then said, Boss Wu, you really can't be a tyrant. To be a tyrant, one had to be ruthless. Ruthless to the enemy, and ruthless to oneself. At most, Wu Shanlong was ruthless to the enemy. To his own people, he was practically a saint. Wu Shanlong had a solemn expression. Since we are friends, I have a responsibility to tell you all the information and not deceive our allies. Yang Xiao's charming eyes became silky, and she said seductively, Then if I need anything, can I also ask Boss Wu for help? I'm honor-bound to do so, Wu Shanlong said resolutely. Yang Xiao moved closer and whispered in Wu Shanlong's ear. I'm very empty and scared right now. I need Boss Wu to hold me. The warm breath sprayed all over Wu Shanlong's face, and a few strands of hair also brushed against his cheek, making him feel an itchy urge to sneeze. Wu Shanlong immediately turned red with embarrassment and anger, saying anxiously, How can a woman be so shameless? But Yang Xiao wrapped around him like an octopus. So what if I'm shameless? Brother Wu, just give in to me. She used her ability. Her ability was to control liquids, like water or blood. Under her control, the blood in Wu Shanlong's body immediately rushed to one place. Wu Shanlong naturally noticed and was both ashamed and furious. Seeing that he was about to get angry, Yang Xiao immediately warned, If you don't help me today, I'm leaving first thing tomorrow morning. Wu Shanlong was about to push her away, but his hand froze as he reached out. If Yang Xiao left as well, this battle would be truly difficult. Without hesitation, he was pounced on by Yang Xiao. Even if he had the self-control of a saint, he was no match for Yang Xiao, an ability user who could make all a person's blood rush to one place. Heaven's thunder ignited the earth's fire. A night passed. Xiao Ran finally woke up. He found himself holding a woman, fragrant, soft, and, well, springy. He immediately realized it was Shu Ruaji and smiled. "How long did I sleep?" "Almost a full day and night," Shu Ruaji said. Then, with a gurgle, her stomach growled in protest. She had been holding Xiao Ran the whole time and naturally hadn't had time to eat. "Let's eat." Xiao Ran was hungry too. With a thought, he took out a large amount of food. Thankfully, the spatial gate was usable again. Xiao Ran let out a long sigh of relief. He had been afraid that Sakurada Keiko had broken the spatial gate, preventing him from ever accessing the items in the alternate space. That would have been a huge problem. First, he would lose one of his strongest offensive methods. Second, the 3 billion plus worth of supplies would also be gone. As Xiao Ran used the spatial gate, he immediately noticed a very subtle change. It was bent. That's right, it was bent. It had a tiny bit of curve. Although it was very, very small, Xiao Ran was so familiar with the spatial gate that he noticed it immediately. Originally, the spatial gate was a perfect plane, but now it had a slight curve. It was caused by Sakurada Keiko's punch. Xiao Ran was dumbfounded. He had always wanted to shape the spatial gate into a sphere, but had never been able to, no matter how hard he tried. Later, with abilities like banishment, spatial swap, and even spatial domain, he had set that idea aside. The need wasn't as urgent. But now he saw hope again. Although it was just a small curve, what if he could consistently continue this process? Could he turn the spatial gate into a curved surface and eventually a sphere? But now that it's slightly bent, can I still straighten it? Or should I just go with the flow? Xiao Ran. Shu Ruaji called out when she saw him dazed. Xiao Ran came back to his senses and smiled at her. "It's nothing, let's eat." Shu Ruaji agreed. She was indeed hungry and quickly began to eat. Xiao Ran was also eating, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't bend the spatial gate before, because he was using the wrong method. Just as jade needs to be carved to become a masterpiece, this spatial gate needed to be hit to become a sphere. But it's going to be so damn painful for me. However, once I turn the spatial gate into a sphere, this ability will have no weaknesses. Does a sphere have a border? In the future, he would just need to trap his enemies inside the spatial gate. Unless they stayed still for the rest of their lives, they would be sent into the alternate space. Combat would be simplified to find target, lock target, release spatial gate, and the key was that opening and maintaining the spatial gate consumed no ability at all. This meant that no matter how powerful an enemy was, once trapped, they would have no possibility of escaping and would just be worn down to death. "I'll start training after I eat." Xiao Ran made his decision. The ability users of the present and future would only get stronger, and he needed a new killing move. After eating, he found an empty space and began to practice. Actually, it was very simple. He just had to use external force to hit the edge of the spatial gate. Too little force wouldn't work. It wouldn't deform the door frame at all. Too much force was even worse. It could be fatal. Xiao Ran first opened the spatial gate 10 meters high, then dropped a normal stone. He then shrank the spatial gate and opened it close to the ground, letting the falling stone hit it. Thump! With the force of the impact, Xiao Ran felt a slight pain in his head. The spatial gate didn't deform at all, and he was only in pain for a moment, then he was fine. The force was too small. Xiao Ran accelerated the stone once and threw it again. Thump! Still a jolt and a pain, still not enough force. So he accelerated it twice, 3 times. He would eventually find a reasonable value. Sure enough, after accelerating the stone 9 times, the impact actually caused the spatial gate to deform. It was very slight, but the damage to Xiao Ran wasn't particularly great within a tolerable range. He just needed to rest for 10 minutes before continuing. The deformation of the spatial gate was actually very small, not even 1% of Sakurada Keiko's punch, but Xiao Ran didn't need to be so harsh on himself. What if he really broke the spatial gate? He would take it slow. During the 10-minute rest, Xiao Ran played around with some new tricks. He accelerated the sonic rebar and sonic stone again. How to accelerate them? The air had resistance, so there was naturally a speed limit. It wasn't possible before, but now he had the spatial compression ability, didn't he? He would release the sonic stone or rebar, then use the air bullet form by spatial compression to push it, further accelerating the stone and rebar. Xiao Ran wasn't greedy. He accelerated it to twice the speed of sound. Any faster would be too difficult. First, even if he jumped into the air and used banishment on himself, opening the spatial gate 10 meters above his head to release the stone or rebar, and then opening it 10 meters below his feet to catch it, it was only a distance of 20 meters. How long would it take for a sonic stone to cross that distance? In such a short time, he had to open the spatial gate, release the spatial compression air bullet, and then reopen the spatial gate below his feet, a total of 3 steps. So, accelerating the stone and rebar to twice the speed of sound, he felt he couldn't do any more. He had reached his limit of control. Twice the speed of sound was enough. The kinetic energy instantly quadrupled. Xiao Ran polished it a few more times, but the progress combined wasn't as much as Sakurada Keiko's one punch. This really couldn't be rushed. The thought of being so severely injured by that one punch that he slept for nearly a day and a night still gave him lingering fear. Slow was fine. He had enough abilities now anyway. Wu Shanlong was here. Xiao Ran stopped his training and waited for him to arrive. I heard you woke up. How are you? Have you recovered? Wu Shanlong asked. Xiao Ran nodded. Fully recovered. That's good. Wu Shanlong nodded, relieved. Xiao Ran was about to speak, but after a glance at Wu Shanlong, he couldn't help but find it strange. Boss Wu, you seem a little different. How to put it? He had a sort of smug, spring-in-his-step feeling. Wu Shanlong's old face rarely blushed, but he forced himself to say, how am I any different? Well, it would have been fine if you hadn't tried to deny it. Your denial is basically a confirmation. Faced with Xiao Ran's teasing smile, Wu Shanlong quickly changed the subject. I think we should take the initiative and attack the Black Dragon Society before Odiri has fully digested the ability he absorbed. Otherwise, Odiri will only get stronger. Xiao Ran nodded. There's no time to lose. Let's move immediately. Wu Shanlong and Yang Xiaoxiao were already packed and ready, just waiting for Xiao Ran to recover before taking action. It wasn't advisable to bring too many people on this trip. In a battle between experts like them, low-level ability users weren't even cannon fodder. A random shockwave could wipe them out completely. Therefore, they shouldn't bring many people, only elite troops. Wu Shanlong chose 3 people, and Yang Xiaoxiao also only selected 4, all of whom were her right and left-hand men. Watching the unconscious, affectionate gestures between Wu and Yang, Xiao Ran suddenly understood. No wonder Wu Shanlong seemed different. He had been nourished by a woman. Well, in a little while, even the pimples on Wu Shanlong's face would disappear. Wu Shanlong, a man as hard as steel, blushed under Xiao Ran's teasing gaze. In contrast, Yang Xiaoxiao was poised and graceful, extending her hand to Xiao Ran. Boss Xiao, we finally meet. Xiao Ran didn't shake her hand. Instead, he winked at Wu Shanlong. I'm Xiao Ran. Let's skip the handshake. I'm afraid a certain someone will get jealous and chop me with a sword. Yang Xiaoxiao couldn't help but cover her mouth and giggle, while Wu Shanlong was extremely embarrassed. He was good at fighting. No matter how serious the injury, he wouldn't even frown. But when it came to matters between men and women, he was too inexperienced, his skin too thin. Not to mention Xiao Ran. Even his own subordinates were laughing. TSK, the captain's old tree was finally blooming. Let's go. Wu Shanlong boomed, trying to cover up his inner embarrassment. The group of 10 set out towards the Black Dragon Society. Although Yin Guanghao had run away, they weren't necessarily without a chance of winning. And in another day or so, Odiri's strength would increase again, making him even harder to deal with. In less than half an hour, they arrived at the Black Dragon Society. From a distance, Xiao Ran frowned. His spatial perception had already seen the situation inside the Black Dragon Society. Normally, after absorbing Jeang Yuankai's ability, the radius of his spatial perception should have been close to 12 kilometers, but in reality, it was only 10 kilometers. So, spatial perception also had a distance limit. However, this ability wasn't without room for improvement. Xiao Ran found that the level of detail in his spatial perception had gone up another level. Before, the microscopic level was at most cellular. Now, it had taken another step forward. The magnification and clarity had both improved significantly, though it was still far from the molecular level. Xiao Ran didn't know what use this microscopic improvement had, but since his spatial perception had reached its range limit, what could he do? What made Xiao Ran frown wasn't the change in his spatial perception, but the situation inside the Black Dragon Society. Corpses were strewn everywhere. In the residential area where the Black Dragon Society was located, besides Odiri and his group of little Japs, there were the women for their entertainment and a large number of test subjects. But now, aside from the Japs, everyone else was dead. They had died in various ways. all of them extremely tragic. Xiao Ran didn't say a word. The group cautiously approached, and all noticed something was wrong. It was too quiet. Shan Long had his scout use his ability to check, and the person soon reported the same scene Xiao Ran had seen earlier. What? The group rushed into the residential area, and indeed saw a large number of bodies. The little Japs have fled. Odiri must have guessed we would attack in the next 2 days, so he simply killed everyone and retreated. He's determined to lie low for a few days to fully digest Shen Mingfei's ability. A bunch of animals. The little Japs could run, but to kill everyone here before leaving, they were truly ruthless and insane. Shan Long frowned and asked the scout, "You didn't notice anything unusual yesterday?" The scout shook his head. "No, could they have done it last night? Perhaps there's someone among the little Japs who can create illusions, deceiving his ability," Xiao Ran guessed. This was a possibility, but why? What was the point of making everyone think the little Japs were still in their old lair? As Xiao Ran's thoughts turned, his heart sank. Not good, Guanghao. The Japs' target is Guanghao. Odiri deliberately made them think he was still in his old lair, fully absorbing the benefits from Shen Mingfei. But in reality, he had gone to hunt down Guanghao. Instantly, the faces of Shan Long and Yang Xiuxiu changed. This was bad. If Odiri really killed Guanghao and absorbed his ability, how strong would he become? Even Xiao Ran felt it would be difficult. He took a deep breath to calm himself and said, "You guys go back first. I'll find Odiri." The radius of his spatial perception had reached 10 kilometers, and how big was the entire city of Hai? At his speed, it wouldn't even take half a day to search the whole place. He had to find Odiri as soon as possible. Otherwise, if the devil really did hunt down Guanghao, once he finished digesting, how strong would he become? Beast types not only had the advantages of physical types, but also possessed strange and varied abilities, making up for the lack of variety in physical type attacks. At that point, Xiao Ran might be killed in one move before he could even react. Moreover, Odiri was not as easy to deal with as Duan Chong, who could be handled with a single spatial swap and a free fall. The old devil had wings and could fly. It would be very difficult to trap and kill him. He could only be killed with true strength. Indeed, Hai City had too large a population, producing many ability users and even more experts. The competition was too fierce. But this trip was the right one to make. If he hadn't come, this battle in Hai City would very likely have ended with a complete victory for the Black Dragon Society. How strong would Odiri have become then? When Odiri attacked Su City, would he have been able to stop him? Counting the time, how many days had passed since he decided to come to Hai City? 8 days. If he had been just a few days late, the situation in Hai City would have been decided, and he would have been powerless to change it. Of course, he was also a variable in this struggle for Hai City. Without his appearance, the situation might have developed similarly, but probably not so quickly. He had been too ruthless in the Black Dragon Society, pushing Odiri to the brink, which led to the hasty implementation of the Sand Poison Plan. It was also because he had entered the Black Dragon Society to hunt down Jeang Yuankai that Odiri and Shen Mingfei's honeymoon period might have ended sooner. But since things had already reached this point, what was the use of thinking about it? Find Odiri. Find all the little Japs from the Black Dragon Society. Kill them all, without leaving a single one. Xiao Ran moved through the city like a ghost, his spatial perception open. He could detect everything within a 10-kilometer radius. As long as Odiri and his group were still in the city, he would definitely find them. In just 2 hours, Xiao Ran stopped. Found them. Odiri and his group of little Japs were hiding on the outskirts of Hai City. Well, they were almost at Zhujiangjia City. This discovery also made Xiao Ran's heart sink, because it was very likely to confirm that the little Japs had intercepted and killed Guanghao, and were now planning to fully digest their gains here before launching a full-scale attack. Why leave an illusion-type ability user in their old lair? To lull Shan Long and the others into a false sense of security, so they wouldn't run away in fear overnight. Odiri's appetite was huge. He wanted to wipe out all the ability user factions in Hai City in one fell swoop. By doing so, he could very well become the #1 expert in the country, or even the world. If he moved fast enough, he might actually be able to conquer the entire world. Abilities were like a snowball. The advantage would accumulate more and more. If you were just a step behind, you could only watch helplessly as the strongest one became someone you could only look up to, completely unable to catch up. If he moved fast enough, he might actually be able to conquer the entire world. Abilities were like a snowball. The advantage would accumulate more and more. If you were just a step behind, you could only watch helplessly as the strongest one became someone you could only look up to, completely unable to catch up. Without the additional factor of the golden snowflakes, theoretically, as long as you absorb the power of half the world ability users, no one would be able to shake your position. Xiao Ran moved a little closer, and his spatial perception encompassed Odiri's entire group. Not good. Xiao Ran shook his head. Odiri was strong, very strong, extremely strong. He used strong 3 times because the cellular strength of Odiri's body had more than doubled in just over a day. But one had to know, Shen Mingfei was supposed to be weaker than Odiri. Just by absorbing Shan Mingfei's ability, and not even for the full 3 days to digest it all, how could Odiri's cellular strength have increased by more than double? There was only one possibility. He had absorbed a new ability. Whose? Guanghao's. That coward old Yin, who seemed to have fled with his tail between his legs overnight, had instead ended up isolated, allowing Odiri to take the opportunity to kill him. Damn it, wasn't this the definition of a pig teammate? Making things harder for his own side? However, how could Odiri have carried out such a precise ambush? Guanghao was so timid. He would definitely have been extremely careful. A traitor, Xiao Ran immediately realized. There must have been a traitor, otherwise, how could it be such a coincidence? He rubbed his temples. The good news was that Odiri would need until tomorrow to completely absorb Shan Mingfei's ability, and the day after to finish digesting Guanghao's. So, this was not Odiri at his strongest. Therefore, the choice was either to have a decisive battle with Odiri now, or to run away quickly. Once Odiri reached his peak state, they might not even have a chance to react before being slaughtered. Xiao Ran quietly left. He had conducted his investigation from nearly 10 kilometers away. Even if Odiri was not the same as before, he couldn't have been discovered. Returning to the Zheng'an settlement, Xiao Ran shared his findings. Wu Shanlong and Yang Xiuxiu both turned pale. What to do, fight or not? We can't win. How can we fight? Yang Xiuxiu immediately shook her head. We should just retreat quickly. The fall of High City is inevitable. However, there are still other major cities in the country with dense populations, like the capital and Guang City. It's not impossible for an ability user stronger than Odiri to emerge there. Let them deal with Odiri. She, for one, was not going to her death. Brother Wu, come with me, she said to Wu Shanglong. She still had feelings for him. His strength and character were rare qualities in a partner in this apocalyptic world. But Wu Shanglong refused directly. Odiri has just absorbed Yin Guanghao and Shun Mingfei's abilities. He's a beast type, so he needs time to digest the abilities. Now is the best time to assassinate him. If we miss this chance, there probably won't be another. Most importantly, once Odiri unified High City, he could easily move north or west, devouring local ability users along the way. By the time he reached Guang City or the capital, how strong would he be? Perhaps the whole of China would fall because of this little Jap, and countless countrymen would become slaves. This kind of suppression by an ability user was even harder to overthrow than the 3 Great Mountains. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary person could kill an enemy with a gun, but now, could an ordinary person with a gun kill an ability user? Wu Shanlong's expression was firm, his eyes filled with fighting spirit. Yang Xiuxiu just glanced at him and gave up trying to persuade him. Once this kind of person made a decision, not even 9 bulls could pull him back. She admired it, but she would not accompany him. Brother Wu, I hope you succeed. Yang Xiuxiu said sincerely. But I won't participate. Wu Shanglong said grimly. Take my brothers with you and the people here. Yang Xiuxiu didn't refuse, nodding in agreement, but couldn't help showing a hint of concern. Brother Wu, if it's impossible, you should preserve your life. After all, heaven never seals off all paths. Maybe a large amount of golden snowflakes will fall next. Damn, so the golden snowflakes are no longer a secret. Xiao Ran complained his heart. Am I the only one who just found out about such a thing? Wu Shanglong agreed, but it was clear he hadn't really taken it to heart. Yang Xiuxiu sighed. She immediately began to mobilize, telling everyone to prepare to evacuate. Meanwhile, Xiao Ran and Wu Shanglong quietly left the camp, heading towards the little Jap's location without any fanfare. Otherwise, Wu Shanglong's group of brothers would definitely be clamoring to go kill the devils with them. Now, Yang Xiuxiu told them that Wu Shanglong was going ahead to scout, and they naturally wouldn't doubt it. Xiao Ran told Shu Ruaji to wait for him at the camp. He didn't share Wu Shanglong's determination to fight to the death. It would be best if he could take out Odiri, but if not, he would withdraw. Why insist on a death match with Odiri? As long as there is life, there is hope. As long as a person is alive, anything is possible. Time to go kill some little Japs. Xiao Ran and Wu Shanglong set out. As top-tier experts, how fast were they? In less than half an hour, they had arrived at their destination. This was even considering that they had a battle ahead and didn't go at full speed. Otherwise, they could have been even faster. But even after arriving at the little Jap's temporary camp, Xiao Ran stopped Wu Shanglong, not letting him attack immediately. Why? Wu Shanglong was a bit anxious because with every passing second, Odiri would grow a little stronger. They couldn't afford to delay. Night is our home ground, Xiao Ran said. At that time, we can advance or retreat as we please. Besides, even if we can beat Odiri now, can you guarantee he won't be able to escape? It's different at night. The fog will be thick, and without a sense of direction, he'll be like a headless chicken. In a situation where you can't see, almost no one can walk in a straight line. After a few steps, you'll veer off course and end up walking in circles. Don't believe me? Try it. Wu Shanglong looked at Xiao Ran in surprise. You can see in the thick fog? Xiao Ran smiled and nodded. Yeah, then we'll wait until night, Wu Shanglong agreed. There was still some time until dark, so Xiao Ran took out a stake and tossed it to Wu Shanglong. You need to be full to have strength. Wu Shanglong took the stake in some shock because it was still steaming. He started to speak but stopped. Xiao Ran just smiled. A little ability. Your ability is not little at all. Wu Shanglong thought to himself, but after this battle, neither he nor Xiao Ran knew if they would survive. What was there to be pretentious about? He laughed heartily, grabbed the stake, and started to gnaw on it. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. What kind of stuff did Wu Shanglong and his men eat every day? Not to mention that ability users had stronger physiques and needed a lot more food. Even before the cataclysm, a big soldier like Wu Shanglong wouldn't have had a small appetite. How could not eating enough not affect combat effectiveness? Although Xiao Ran admired these soldier brothers, he also felt they were too rigid. If you ability users can't even eat well, or even eat your fill, how can you properly protect others? In times like these, you can't have fair treatment. At the very least, you have to ensure the soldiers are well fed. This time, Wu Shanglong wasn't pretentious. He quickly finished the steak. Seeing his unsatisfied look, it was clear he could have eaten another one or even two. But even though Xiao Ran clearly had a lot more food, he didn't take it out. It wasn't good to be too full before battle. As long as it didn't affect combat performance, it was actually better to feel a little hungry. After eating, both of them fell silent, resting and adjusting their state. A tough battle lay ahead. It would not be easy. Today might be their last day in this world. Of course, this was only Wu Shanglong's realization. Xiao Ran had no intention of fighting to the death. If things really became impossible, he would decisively leave. As long as there is life, there is hope. Why needlessly contribute his ability to the little Japs? Soon, it grew dark, and a thick fog rolled in. Let's go. Xiao Ran led the way. Wu Shanglong followed closely behind, but as soon as he stepped out, he lost sight of Xiao Ran. The fog was incredibly thick. Unless a wind-type ability user could blow it away, any ability user would be as blind as a bat. There's a wall 10 meters ahead. Xiao Ran's voice sounded at the right time. Brother Wu, you're going crooked, a bit to the left. All right, stop. Xiao Ran whispered. They had entered the residential area where the Black Dragon Society's group was temporarily staying and had even entered a storage room. Because it was a temporary residence, and Odiri would never have thought Xiao Ran could find them so quickly. There were no warning devices set up along the way, like tripwires with bells. There were sentries, but Xiao Ran had opened his spatial domain earlier. It would be strange if the sentries could hear any sound at all. Within 100 meters, there were quite a few enemies. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. He activated a spatial swap, and swoosh, a person appeared out of thin air in front of them. The man's mouth had just opened when Xiao Ran sent a spatial cut, easily killing him. When Wu Shanglong suddenly saw a person appear, he immediately threw a punch. His fist instantly turned red hot, the temperature reaching at least several thousand degrees. If hit by such a punch, 99% of ability users would be severely injured. But he immediately retracted his fist, a look of surprise on his face. He found that this little Jap was already dead. A living person had appeared out of nowhere and died so quickly, without making a sound. Amazing. Although he had fought alongside Xiao Ran before, Xiao Ran's abilities were numerous and strange. It was impossible for him to understand them all. Unlike him, a fire-type ability user, no matter how many abilities he had, they were all related to fire. No matter how fancy his moves were, they were still imaginable. Xiao Ran repeated the process, first taking out the Black Dragon Society's sentries one by one, then starting with the weakest people. This time he was smarter. He first opened his spatial domain to eliminate all noise. Even if he couldn't kill an opponent in one hit and they made a sound or movement, it was impossible for it to be transmitted out. Mainly, after absorbing Jeang Yuankai's ability, the duration of his spatial domain had increased to nearly 24 minutes, allowing him to use it freely without worrying about running out of power after a few uses. Shan Long had practically become a mascot. At first, he was tense and ready to attack at any moment, but soon he was squatting on the side, speechless. To think that he, the great boss Wu, so majestic and domineering, who was always at the forefront of every fight, was now reduced to a spectator? But he had to admit, Xiao Ran's abilities were too heaven-defying. One after another, clean and without any fuss. It was truly a divine assassination skill. After Xiao Ran killed nearly 100 small fry, there were no more such soft crabs for him to pinch. Now, only Odiri, Ozawataro, Sarada Keiko, and 5 so-called generals remained. He had gained a lot. These little Japs had contributed a total of 2,000 units of ability to him. Although it was only half of Jeang Yuankai, 2,000 units was still a considerable amount. Continue. Same old rule, start with the weak. Same old rule, start with the weak. Xiao Ran and Shan Long moved to a different location, because the 5 generals were too far away, beyond the range of his spatial swap. Activate, come, swoosh, a new little Jap appeared. It was the wind-type ability user. Xiao Ran felt he was the biggest threat. Once this person's ability was gone, Odiri would become a blind man. Enum, the wind-type ability user had just appeared when he let out a cry of alarm and instinctively transformed into a gust of wind. Xiao Ran sent a spatial cut, but it had no effect. No matter how finely you cut the wind, can you hurt the wind? This ability was almost completely immune to physical damage. The ability user howled, trying to send out a warning of the enemy attack, but in the spatial domain, as long as Xiao Ran didn't agree, what sound could get out? Little Jap die. Shan Long finally had a chance to shine. Boom! He threw a fire punch. The fire fist was dazzling, like a red sun rising in the darkness. That little Jap wanted to dodge, but there was no escape. He was instantly struck by the punch. However, he was currently in a state of wind. This punch couldn't exert any force on him. It was like hitting empty air, whose fist could injure the air. The wind that the little Jap had transformed into merely stirred. But while the force couldn't harm him, the flames spread along with the wind. Fire within the wind, fire burning the body of wind. It was like a fire tornado. Now, the little Jap was in for a rough time. Wind could certainly be immune to physical strikes, but fire was not. This should be considered a magical or elemental attack, and the scorching heat seared him. An idea sparked in Xiao Ran's mind. He first cast banishment on the little Jap, then withdrew his space domain. Instantly, a swirling vortex of fire and wind was trapped within an extremely narrow area. No matter how the fiery wind stirred or how wildly it howled, it couldn't break out of such a small space. The key was that the raging flames had no room to be released, and the high temperature was confined to this tiny area, forcing the little Jap to endure the constant high-temperature roasting. Shan Long found it incredible and said, "Is this little Jap finished just like that?" Xiao Ran smiled. "Do you want to add some difficulty?" "Ah, no need." Shan Long shook his head with a laugh. Just as Xiao Ran was about to speak, he sighed and said, "Odiri has found us." Odiri suddenly woke up, brandishing his sword and running around wildly, clearly aware that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next moment, Odiri's voice boomed out, but he was speaking Japanese. Xiao Ran couldn't understand what he was shouting. Within his spatial perception, he saw Ozawataro, Sakurada Keiko, and the others all startle awake and charge out as well. "Brother Wu, we have a tough fight ahead of us," Xiao Ran said to Shan Long. Shan Long laughed heartily. "I couldn't ask for more." Boom! In the next instant, the wall shattered, and a blade aura appeared. Odiri had broken through the wall. His gaze swept over them, his katana swung, and a chilling blade aura slashed towards the two of them. Compared to just over a day ago, the power of this blade aura had doubled. Eating 2 major players in a row was like accelerating his digestion. Odiri's rate of enhancement had clearly quickened. Crucially, this blade aura was incredibly long and sustained. Odiri had clearly learned his lesson and was giving Xiao Ran no chance to absorb it. Xiao Ran sighed and cast banishment on both himself and Shan Long. Banishment only had a limit on total volume, not on the number of targets. Before the fight started, Xiao Ran had briefly discussed tactics with Shan Long. It was very simple. Wu Shanlong was only responsible for attacking, and defense was left to Xiao Ran. As expected, Wu Shanlong was a very decisive person. Since the tactic was set, he would execute it without compromise. Even as the sword slash came at him, he didn't even frown. His gaze was sharp, his hands clenched into fists, and flames blazed. The moment the blade light passed, Xiao Ran immediately removed the banishment, and Wu Shanlong charged out without hesitation. "Little Jap," he roared, his fists swinging like a machine gun. Swish, 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 fiery fists shot out, storming towards Odiri. Odiri sneered, "Mr. Wu, to use your Huaxiao words, I am no longer the man I once was." The fire fists flew over, but before they could get close, they all shattered as if they had been pulverized, and then they were extinguished. Wu Shanlong was greatly alarmed. What kind of ability was this? That's not right, you're a zoanthrope type. Although you do have a few more abilities than a martial arts type, it can't be this outrageous. Moreover, the two of them had fought for over 3 months. They knew each other's abilities inside and out. But Odiri's current ability was too bizarre and inexplicable. "I call it the Blade Domain," Odiri said in non-standard Huaxiao language. "Haha, after absorbing Shun Mingfei's Esper ability, I gained this terrifying power. It was just difficult to master. But after killing and absorbing Yin Guanghao's Esper ability, the power of this Blade Domain was further enhanced." "Mr. Wu, did you think I was just waiting here for my body's enhancement to finish?" "Yes, but also no. I was mastering the use of the Blade Domain." "Haha, this isn't like physical enhancement that takes 3 days to complete. An Esper ability reaches its peak instantly." "Mr. Wu, you fought me for so long. Today it should all end." "And you?" Odiri stared at Xiao Ran, his expression suddenly becoming ferocious and cruel. "Not only will you die, but you will die a very miserable death. I'm going to stab you through the ass with this sword, roast you over a fire, and let you die in the greatest agony." Xiao Ran chuckled. "You burned, killed, raped, and plundered in our Huaxia, and yet I don't hold such a deep-seated grudge. Where does all your resentment come from?" Since Odiri didn't attack immediately, he was happy to stall for time, at least until the wind ability Esper was dealt with. However, it was highly likely that Odiri now also possessed a domain ability. He had a space domain, while Odiri had something like a blade or a domain. So, absorbing a certain quantity of Esper abilities could indeed generate a domain. This ability would not be easy to deal with. Odiri didn't speak again. He didn't even keep chewing on the name Chao Shining while cursing, because he knew it was very likely Xiao Ran's fake name. What was the point of cursing it? Capturing this damn guy and killing him in a cruel way, that was the only way. Boom! The wall shattered again, and Sakurada Keiko and the others charged in. Ozawataro stood far away. His Esper ability was cursing, and close-quarters combat was definitely not his forte, so he wisely kept his distance. Otherwise, a single space exchange from Xiao Ran could force him to use his life-saving move. "Kill!" Odiri charged forward, pushing his blade aura. A single slash sent out an endless wave of light, all to prevent Xiao Ran from using his space gate. Xiao Ran maintained banishment on himself, while constantly applying and removing it from Wu Shanlong. Wu Shanlong would use it when attacked, and it would be removed after the attack passed. With his assistance, Wu Shanlong only needed to focus on attacking with all his might. His attack power was by no means weak. Facing Odiri was indeed a challenge, but against Sakurada Keiko and the others, he had a crushing advantage. In particular, he had a fire ability, while Sakurada Keiko had an ice ability. They countered each other, and it came down to whose Esper ability was stronger. Without a doubt, Sakurada Keiko was completely suppressed by him. The banishment ability also left Ozawataro with no room to maneuver. Even if he had a strand of Xiao Ran's or Wu Shanlong's hair, it would be affected by banishment, unable to exert even a tenth of its power. Success. Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. The little Jap with the wind ability, Esper, couldn't hold on any longer. He dropped out of his wind form and turned into a charred corpse. Space exchange. Xiao Ran swapped the little Jap's corpse over, reached out, and pressed down to absorb his Esper ability. Including this little Jap's Esper ability, he should be no weaker than Odiri. Odiri slashed out with his sword. The slash was incredibly sharp, enveloping both Xiao Ran and Wu Shanlong, forcing Xiao Ran to use banishment on both of them to avoid the blade's edge. Odiri slashed again and again, a cold smile on his face. "I can swing my sword like this all day. Can you use your ability indefinitely?" He was definitely not bluffing. A zoanthrope type was a replica of a martial arts type. Their advantage was explosive power and astonishing stamina. His claim that he could slash like this for a whole day was no exaggeration. The rest of you, back off, Odiri added. In front of Xiao Ran, the others were just cannon fodder. If they were pulled into that strange space of his, it would become a one-on-one fight, and the others wouldn't be able to interfere, just like what happened to the wind ability Esper, where Odiri was completely unable to intervene. Sakura Keiko and the others were treated as ordered, staying close to each other so they could provide support and handle any sudden situations. Xiao Ran laughed heartily. After absorbing the Wind Jap's Esper ability, his total Esper energy had broken through 14,000 units, almost reaching 15,000, which was double what he had when he first came from Sioux City. You got stronger, but did I not? Come on, let's go head-to-head. Who's afraid of whom? Xiao Ran opened a space gate to the side, opening and closing it in an instant. For what? Swish, 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 steel bars moving at twice the speed of sound shot towards Odiri. Child's play, Odiri sneered. The steel bars that entered a 3-meter radius around him were all pulverized, losing all their power. Xiao Ran saw it clearly with his spatial perception. After entering that range, the steel bars were sliced apart by countless sharp energy currents. In just an instant, all the steel bars were completely disintegrated. This was definitely a domain. Can't deal with you? Fine, let's go head-to-head. Brother Wu, I'll leave those small fries to you. Xiao Ran used space exchange on Wu Shanlong in a distant rock. Wu Shanlong was swapped to a location not far from Sakura Keiko and the others. Don't worry. Wu Shanlong laughed, flames erupting from his body. With a tap of his foot, bang, he shot into the sky. The flames burned the air, essentially giving him an engine, granting him astonishing speed and jumping ability, even allowing him to hover. Although he was the leader of a faction, he was fighting 1 against 5. People like Sakura Keiko and Ozawataro were only 1 tier below him, so he was actually at a disadvantage in terms of strength. However, with his incredibly flexible mobility and masterful combat skills, he showed no signs of being at a disadvantage in the short term. But such a situation couldn't last for long, so he could only hope that Xiao Ran could suppress Odiri, or even win the battle. Xiao Ran released his domain, directly confronting Odiri's blade domain. Boom! The two domains collided, and both of them frowned simultaneously because they found that their Esper energy was being consumed at an astonishing rate. The clash of domains could be considered the most direct collision of Esper abilities, easily determining victory or defeat, even life and death. Regarding this, Xiao Ran was very calm. Even if he lost in the end, as long as he had a tiny bit of Esper energy left, he could still escape via space exchange. But for Odiri to escape from his grasp? Difficult. Xiao Ran maintained his space domain for the confrontation, and Odiri naturally wouldn't back down. He was the leader of the Black Dragon Society. If he chickened out now, his subordinates would likely be wiped out by Xiao Ran, and after absorbing their Esper abilities, wouldn't Xiao Ran be even stronger? Damn it. He now realized that only Sakura Keiko and these few subordinates were left. The others had all been killed by Xiao Ran, which infuriated him to no end. If he had known, he should have killed those people himself. Wouldn't it have been better for him to absorb their Esper abilities? But there were no second chances in this world. He let out a great roar, flapped his wings, and pushed off with his feet. Boom! He charged toward Xiao Ran, his katana in a thrusting position, stabbing fiercely at Xiao Ran. The domains are at a stalemate? Then let's try this. The sword thrust arrived, but Xiao Ran surprisingly didn't dodge. Odiri's sword pierced through, but he couldn't help but frown because he hadn't hit anything solid, and Xiao Ran's figure disappeared before him like a shattered image. It was an afterimage lingering on the retina. Within the domain, his blade aura was everywhere. He immediately relocated Xiao Ran, and with a thought, countless blade auras materialized from all directions, slashing towards Xiao Ran. He was clearly a physical type brute, but after obtaining a domain, he seemed to have transformed into a sword immortal or blade immortal, able to slash out blade aura from any angle. Xiao Ran smiled faintly, and his body flickered, appearing in another location. Within the space domain, he was like a god. Wasn't teleportation normal? Before, he had actually used the space domain to forcefully neutralize attacks. It was simply foolish, a complete waste of Esper energy. Why'd I have to neutralize them? Couldn't I just dodge? Xiao Ran flashed behind Odiri. The space gate opened slightly, and a row of steel bars shot out. Odiri slashed his sword, and swish, all the incoming steel bars were shredded by the sharp blade aura. He forcefully flapped his wings, and the two wings suddenly extended to 20 meters long each, then swept across like lightning. The two wings swept past like two giant guillotines. Coupled with their terrifying length, there were no blind spots. For a zoanthrope-type Esper, their body was their most terrifying weapon. If hit by such a slash, even Xiao Ran would be cut in two. The key was that Odiri was also using his own domain to obstruct the space domain, making it not so easy for Xiao Ran to teleport. As long as he could slow Xiao Ran down by a negligible millisecond, or even a microsecond, he was confident he could kill Xiao Ran on the spot. Xiao Ran sighed softly and used banishment on himself. The two wings swept past, and Xiao Ran was unharmed. Xiao Ran immediately canceled banishment and, in turn, cast it on Odiri. He planned to toss this enemy aside for now, concentrate his power to kill Sakurada Keiko and the others, and after absorbing their Esper abilities, he would come back to deal with Odiri. By then, the power of his domain would surely be greatly enhanced. However, the banishment he cast netted only empty air. Odiri seemed to have sensed it, and his body suddenly accelerated, escaping the range of the banishment. Xiao Ran couldn't help but frown. Zoanthrope types and martial arts types had terrifying explosive power, making them extremely difficult to lock onto. Back then, the 5x5x5 meter banishment space was enough for Liu Yong. He just had to cast it in his direction. But against Odiri, it was far from enough. Compared to the Liu Yong of the past, Odiri was countless times stronger. He merely felt it was a pity, but Odiri broke out in a cold sweat. Although he didn't fully understand Xiao Ran's abilities, he wasn't unaware of how his wind ability Esper subordinate was trapped by Xiao Ran, unable to escape on his own, while he himself was completely unable to attack. Therefore, if he were trapped by this ability, he could only watch helplessly as Xiao Ran killed all his subordinates and plundered their Esper abilities. A fierce glint flashed in his eyes. He suddenly abandoned Xiao Ran and charged towards Wu Shanglong. One slash. Odiri's slash was incomparably sharp. Moreover, his speed was incredibly fast. Once a zoanthrope type entered an explosive state, they were no different from a martial arts type of the same level. Super fast, super strong, and terrifyingly powerful. Wu Shanglong immediately entered a state of pure fire, just like the wind ability Esper before, which could immunize him from almost all physical damage. At the same time, a thought flashed in Xiao Ran's mind, and he quickly performed a space exchange, pulling himself closer. Then, as he got within 10 meters of Wu Shanglong, he used banishment on him. Swish, the blade light was chilling. Odiri's sword had already reached Wu Shanglong first, the blade passing through his body. But fire had no physical form. Wu Shanglong immediately reverted from his fire form, his body unharmed. But then, his face suddenly changed, and he violently vomited a mouthful of blood. Odiri's slash had indeed not injured him, but the sharp blade aura had entangled with the fire he had become. When he returned to his solid form, it immediately caused him severe trauma. The blade aura flowed throughout his body with the fire, and Wu Shanglong's injuries were comprehensive. After vomiting a mouthful of blood, his skin all over his body was seeping blood. What a terrifying slash! Fortunately, it wasn't a direct hit on his physical body, but just the residual blade aura. Otherwise, one slash could have taken Wu Shanglong's life. This was the terror of a brute. It seemed like he had no fancy abilities, but a simple, unremarkable strike was terrifying to the extreme. Odiri grinned, revealing a triumphant smile. If he could just get a few more slashes in on Wu Shanglong, this enemy would be finished. After absorbing this person's Esper ability, he would naturally advance even further. However, could he kill Xiao Ran with just this? It seemed like it was still a bit lacking. Then he would become even stronger. He was willing to save this most annoying enemy for last, to torture him bit by bit. At this moment, Xiao Ran's banishment finally landed on Wu Shanglong. "Brother Wu, you recover for a bit. Leave this to me," he said in a deep voice, his eyes flashing with a blazing fighting spirit. In his presence, Odiri had actually injured Wu Shanglong, almost killing him with one blow. Wasn't this a slap to his face? Odiri smiled coldly. "All of you attack together. Keep this Huaxia man busy on all fronts." "Yes." Sakurada Keiko and the other four Japs answered in unison, unleashing their ultimate moves and attacking Xiao Ran. With Odiri holding the fort, what do they have to worry about? They put all their Esper energy into offense. The corner of Odiri's mouth curled up, revealing an expression that sent chills down one's spine. He, too, suddenly struck with his sword. Xiao Ran sighed. His space domain expanded, and he continuously teleported, neutralizing all the incoming attacks. At the same time, he launched a counterattack, blasting towards Sakurada Keiko's group of 5. Sakurada Keiko and her group had gone all out on offense, so their defenses were naturally weak. Although they managed to activate their self-preservation abilities, they all looked drained and were almost killed instantly by a single blow. They couldn't understand. Odiri was clearly holding the rear, so why didn't he step in and neutralize Xiao Ran's attacks for them? Just then, a terrifying chill washed over them. Odiri was already swinging his sword, and the tip of his blade was aimed at Sakurada Keiko and the others. What? How could Sakurada Keiko's group of 5 have ever imagined that Odiri would attack them? And with Odiri's speed, once he locked onto a target and attacked, could they even dodge? Unless you were faster, then you might stand chance. But none of Sakurada Keiko's group were skilled in speed. Although they couldn't believe it, they could only muster their last bit of strength to defend. They had first launched an all-out attack, then were injured by Xiao Ran's counterattack. They were at a point where their bodies were wounded and their strength was spent. To be sneak attacked by Odiri's full-powered slash, how could they possibly defend against it? With one slash, all 5 were cut in half at the waist. Moreover, Odiri had already formed his blade domain. This slash was wrapped in a destructive blade aura. Being hit by such a slash, who could survive? Someone as strong as Shan Long, even after entering a state of fire, was still injured to the point of vomiting blood by the residual blade energy. Could these 5 be stronger than Shan Long? One slash, and all of them were dead. Odiri's speed was so fast. He immediately reached out and pressed a hand on Sakurada Keiko's body. A warm current flowed in. Without stopping, he went to touch the second corpse, then the third, and the fourth. But when he touched the 5th corpse, no warm current came. He froze and looked toward Xiao Ran, only to see half a corpse in front of him. The other party had acted a step faster, taking away half of the 5th person's body. What a pity. Of the 5 people's Esper abilities, he had only absorbed 4. But it didn't matter. He had gotten the big prize, Sakurada Keiko, plus 3 other generals, which was probably about 6,000 units of Esper energy. He suddenly turned and looked towards Ozawataro. Since he had already turned his blade on his own people, he might as well go all the way and kill everyone. It didn't matter if all the Japs here died. Weren't there 5 generals and some other capable subordinates sent out? When they returned, he would have people to use again. Taking a step back, weren't there still so many people in his home country? After occupying Huaxia, he would naturally need his own countrymen to help him manage it. He just needed to be responsible for enjoying himself. Ozawataro turned pale with fright and quickly turned to flee. But could he outrun a zoanthrope type, Esper? The blade light flashed, and he was immediately cut in half at the waist. However, before his body could hit the ground, it had already turned into 2 strands of severed hair. His death substitution technique had been activated. His real body was now somewhere unknown. He had escaped death. Odiri's brow furrowed slightly, as if it was a bit of a pity, but he didn't care too much. He turned around and pointed his sword at Xiao Ran. Boom! His whole body flashed with a crimson light, and a terrifying aura emanated from within him. Ha ha ha! I have gained a new ability. Odiri laughed wildly. With a tap of his foot, he charged towards Xiao Ran. Swish! It was like a flash of lightning. Even with Xiao Ran's space perception active, and even though he had now absorbed nearly 17,000 units of Esper energy and was several times stronger than when he fought Duan Chong, his reaction speed had naturally soared, but he could barely track Odiri's movements. He didn't even have time for a crisis warning to arise. He instinctively used banishment on himself. Swish! The moment banishment took effect, Odiri's sword also slashed through his body. Missed by a hair's breadth. Gagaga! Odiri didn't care at all. Zoanthrope types and martial arts types had too much in common, such as long-lasting stamina. He could keep slashing his sword like this all day. Compete with him in stamina? You need a martial arts type of the same level. How long can you maintain that ability? Odiri said with a strange laugh, slashing at Xiao Ran again. A sharp glint appeared in Xiao Ran's eyes. His space domain expanded, and he decisively launched a counterattack. Odiri was taken aback, not expecting Xiao Ran to dare to face him head-on. He swung his sword down, but suddenly felt that something was wrong. Odiri slashed out, but felt something was wrong. Splat! Because he was holding the hilt tightly, when he exerted force, the hilt in his hand actually broke. No, it was squashed. It splattered all over his hand, slippery and slimy. He lifted his hand to look and couldn't help but twitch his lips. His katana had somehow turned into a banana. With his strength, this squeeze. Of course the banana was squashed, smearing his entire palm with its slimy flesh. Was this really a fucking banana? He sniffed it, and the unique fragrance of a banana filled his nostrils. It really was a fucking banana. This. Odiri was both shocked and curious. Could Xiao Ran turn a katana into a banana? No. He saw it. Xiao Ran was holding his sword. His sword. So, Xiao Ran didn't turn the katana into a banana, but rather exchanged the two. It seemed like stating the obvious, but the meaning was completely different. The former meant Xiao Ran could transform the essence of objects, while the latter was just a simple exchange. It must be the latter. Odiri immediately concluded. After fighting for so long, could he not confirm that Xiao Ran was a space-based esper? So, to perform exchange, you must first have the corresponding object, right? Where did this banana come from? Xiao Ran obviously couldn't have a banana hidden on his person, so? You have another independent space? Odiri's eyes burned. Do you have a lot of supplies? Xiao Ran remained nonchalant. His space perception surged, his mind moved, and he once again activated space exchange. Odiri looked down and was so angry he could spit fire. Because in his hand was now a turd. The weather was too cold, so the turd was frozen solid, still maintaining its original shape. He hastily shook his hand, his face a picture of disgust. It's fine. In this cold weather, there's no smell. Xiao Ran even comforted him. Bastard. Odiri was fuming. He violently flapped his wings, and swish, he slashed through Xiao Ran's body like a bolt of lightning, so fast that only an afterimage could be seen. Xiao Ran couldn't help but change his expression. Odiri was too terrifying. He had lost his sword, but his combat power hadn't diminished in the slightest. It was even stronger. Those two wings seemed to be made of alloy, not only incredibly hard, but also sharp, with a lethality that surpassed his katana. The strength of the katana was fixed, but his wings were different. They would continuously increase in strength as his body was enhanced. If there were a ranking for metal grades, these would definitely far exceed the katana. Odiri had rarely used his wings to attack before, probably to deliberately lull him into a false sense of security, to strike him unexpectedly. But now that he had exchanged his katana and given him a turd, Odiri was beyond furious, forced to reveal the even more terrifying lethality of his wings. Although he had played a trick on Odiri, Xiao Ran really couldn't bring himself to laugh. And Odiri was very clever now, standing dozens of meters away from Xiao Ran, not only outside the space domain, but also beyond the reach of the banishment spell. But what was this distance to Odiri? With one burst of speed, he could close in on Xiao Ran in a few milliseconds and deliver a fatal blow. Xiao Ran was annoyed and activated space exchange again. Odiri's face darkened once more, because his shoe had been replaced by a durian shell, and it was upside down. An ordinary person stepping on a durian shell like that would definitely have their skin pierced, but Odiri was completely unfazed. His skin was now comparable to alloy. It would be a joke if a durian could pierce it. On the contrary, the durian shell was crushed by his foot. Xiao Ran's intention, of course, was not to injure Odiri, but purely to disgust him. Again, Xiao Ran continuously activated space exchange. The clothes on Odiri's body disappeared piece by piece, replaced with all sorts of strange things. Lamb skewers, Ruji ammo, and even his underwear was turned into a grenade. Unfortunately, even when the grenade exploded, it didn't harm this little Jap. Odiri, however, remained calm, letting Xiao Ran do as he pleased, only saying coldly, "Are you done yet?" Just then, the grenade exploded. Although it didn't injure him, it blackened his face with soot. Odiri finally snapped. With a move, he spread his two wings, each 10 meters long. As they moved, they not only spun like propellers but also stirred up streams of black energy, which struck a distant wall, leaving deep gashes. What terrifying destructive power! After venting, Odiri calmed down again. He was already in his beast form. Besides growing wings, his body was covered in thick iron feathers, so he didn't have to worry about indecent exposure. And even if he was exposed, so what? He didn't care at all. He was just extremely annoyed at being played by Xiao Ran. Now he was calm. "You have indeed angered me, but this will not change your fate in the slightest," Odiri said arrogantly. "I know you have an ability similar to teleportation, but its range is limited. My hearing is now incredibly sensitive. Even from 500 meters away, I can capture the sound of your feet on the snow. I can close my eyes and find you just by listening. Even if there's a wall in the way, I can easily break through it. You can't escape." Odiri's face was full of confidence. And this wasn't just confidence. It was very close to fact. His current Esper energy had surpassed Xiao Ran's, and the zoanthrope type was also a high-burst, high-stamina category. How could Xiao Ran outlast him? He would be the final victor of this battle. After absorbing Xiao Ran's and Wu Shanglong's Esper abilities, to what extent would he be invincible? Ha ha ha. Thinking of this, Odiri couldn't help but laugh out loud. He would become the ruler of the world. In the future, his name would replace Amaterasu and become the new god of the little Japs, the new god of the whole world. Xiao Ran. Wu Shanglong suddenly shouted, but because he was still in banishment, his voice couldn't reach Xiao Ran's ears. However, Xiao Ran saw his mouth moving, so he first removed the banishment and exchanged him to his side. Brother Wu, we probably can't win this fight, Xiao Ran said. In a moment, I'll send you out. You use your strongest burst to escape. I'll escape my own way. We absolutely cannot fall into this little Jap's hands. Xiao Ran. Wu Shanglong called out again, but Xiao Ran continued. As long as the green hills remain, there will be no lack of firewood. Brother Wu, as long as we live, Xiao Ran. Wu Shanglong called out a third time, finally interrupting him. Xiao Ran stopped. But Wu Shanglong said, that little Jap's explosive power is far beyond ours, and the fog can't stop him. Escaping is impossible. Originally, their greatest reliance was that Xiao Ran could see in the fog, but now Odiri also had this ability. With the little Jap's speed and power, could they possibly escape? Even if Xiao Ran could use space exchange, how many times could he use it? Competing in stamina against a martial arts type or a zoanthrope type. Espers of other attributes were all weaklings in comparison. Xiao Ran, there's only one way now. Wu Shanglong said solemnly to Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran suddenly had a bad feeling. Sure enough, he heard Wu Shanglong say, in a moment, I will kill myself. After you absorb my Esper ability, you shouldn't lose to this little Jap. It would be best if you can kill him, but even if you can't, you should have the ability to survive. Preserve your life, and kill this little Jap in the future. This is our Huaxia's land. How can we let a little Jap run rampant? Haha. As a soldier, it is a worthy death for me to die on the battlefield. Xiao Ran immediately used space exchange to send Wu Shanglong away and then added a banishment on him. But Wu Shanglong didn't care at all. Remember, after you kill this little Jap, use his head as an offering to me and my brothers. With that, he slammed a fist towards his own temple. Brother Wu, Xiao Ran roared. But Wu Shanglong couldn't hear him, and even if he could, he wouldn't have listened. Bang! He punched himself in the temple, deliberately suppressing his instinct to turn into fire. His head was immediately smashed. One must know that seeking advantage and avoiding harm is a biological instinct. When he punched his own temple, his instincts would have made him turn into fire to avoid the damage, but he forcefully suppressed it. What kind of courage was this? What kind of resolve? Brother Wu, Xiao Ran let out a roar like a wounded lone wolf. Unfortunately, Wu Shanglong would never hear it. His eyes were still fixed on Xiao Ran, a carefree smile on his face. Fuck! 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 Xiao Ran kept roaring, tears streaming down his face uncontrollably. But in the next moment, he activated space exchange and moved Wu Shanglong to his side. Brother Wu, I will not let down your hopes, nor will I let you sacrifice yourself in vain, he said, placing his hand on Wu Shanglong's body. Instantly, a warm current flowed in. At that moment, Wu Shanglong's eyes closed. Having died a worthy death, he could rest in peace. This made Xiao Ran's eyes turn red again. Boom! Wu Shanglong's Esper ability was about 4,000 units, directly pushing Xiao Ran's total Esper energy past the 20,000 mark. As all his abilities were strengthened, Xiao Ran also felt a new ability stirring within him. Then, he made a grasping motion in the air towards Odiri. A terrifying scene unfolded. The space around Odiri seemed to shatter. It was a scene extremely difficult to describe in words. The space shattered? It wasn't completely pulverized, but rather like a broken piece of glass, cracked here and there, completely fragmented. Odiri immediately noticed that something was wrong. A powerful and terrifying force was tearing at him, trying to shatter him just like the surrounding space. He was greatly alarmed and quickly opened his domain, while simultaneously rushing away from Xiao Ran. He let out a miserable scream. By the time he had completely rushed out, at least half of the iron feathers on his body had fallen off, and he was covered in blood. His appearance could only be described as a train wreck, but he had astonishing recovery abilities. The wounds were already healing. This was incredibly impressive. Xiao Ran, however, had a cold expression. Whoosh, he used space exchange to close in on Odiri. Like hell, I'm afraid of you. Odiri roared. He had only been caught off guard by Xiao Ran. In terms of real strength, he was not inferior to Xiao Ran. Although Xiao Ran had absorbed Shan Long's Esper ability, at most he was on par, maybe even a little weaker. He spread his wings, and with a powerful push from his feet, bang, he shot towards Xiao Ran like a rocket. His wings slashed out long black energy streams, intended to make Xiao Ran afraid to open his space gate. Fast. Incredibly fast. However, Xiao Ran was long prepared. He had already used banishment on himself in advance, and then he pressed his hand forward. New ability activated. This was Space Shatter. As Odiri charged over, it was like an average Joe wandering into a room full of broken glass. And these glass shards weren't just on the ground. They filled a vast area. Therefore, with every step Odiri took, his entire body was slashed. His legs, torso, arms, and wings were all cut, causing feathers to fall and blood to splash. But this little Jap had also gone berserk, forcefully breaking out of this shattered space. He brought his wings together, striking at Xiao Ran like a guillotine. Unfortunately, it was completely useless. Banishment was invincible. Even if Odiri's attack was 10,000 times more domineering, it couldn't harm Xiao Ran. At this moment, Xiao Ran was filled with endless killing intent. He was expressionless and once again activated Space Shatter. Odiri charged out, but this time almost all his iron feathers were gone. If not for being covered in blood, he would have been completely exposed. He stared at Xiao Ran, his broken brow furrowed tightly. He couldn't move recklessly anymore, or he would be worn down to death by Xiao Ran first. He stood still. If I don't move, can you still hurt me? The problem was, Space Shatter was completely different from his previous abilities. For example, the space gate couldn't open if it encountered an obstacle. Like indoors, it could only open to the size of the room, and there could be no obstacles along the way, or it would be interrupted. Against the space gate, if you didn't move, you were safe unless Xiao Ran used space compression to push it. But Space Shatter? Within this area, all space was fragmented. If there was an apple in this area, the apple would be destroyed into pieces. If there was an Iron Man, the surface and interior of the Iron Man would also be shattered. In this space, everything was broken. So what if Odiri stood still? His body was immediately cut and twisted by the terrifying force. Even though he was incredibly powerful now, he was still no match for this kind of power. Because this wasn't just Xiao Ran's own power, but also the destructive force naturally generated by the shattered space, the difference being how much of it Xiao Ran could command. But one relied entirely on himself, while the other could borrow strength. Were they on the same level? This was the difference between Esper ability attributes. There was no other way. Odiri let out a furious roar and could only forcefully charge out of this shattered area. Otherwise, his body would be continuously broken down into a pile of unconscious flesh. He charged out and, without a word, spread his wings to flee. An Esper like him was best suited for surprise attacks, for killing the opponent before they could react at all. Go! If he missed his chance, he would be constantly watched by Xiao Ran. You could defend for a while, but can you defend forever? However, just as he lifted his leg, he was struck by a strong sense of foreboding. Danger ahead. It was Xiao Ran's net ability. If he went in, he would surely die. Damn it, he had to turn around and run. But no matter how fast he was, turning took the most time. By the time he could exert force again, that sense of danger was back. Opening and closing the space gate only took a thought for Xiao Ran. Now, Odiri was caught between a rock and a hard place. Odiri dare not move, although his current strength was immense, and a single swing of his blade wings could easily slice an entire building in half. He had a gut feeling that if he fell into Xiao Ran's net, he would die. He would definitely die. But if he didn't move, Space Shatter would activate right on top of him. With Odiri at the center, the entire space within a 5-meter radius was fragmented, meaning his body would also be torn to shreds by the terrifying spatial force. It had to be said, Odiri's strength was truly formidable. The zoanthrope type also possessed astonishing recovery power. Wounds would start healing the moment they were opened. In this respect, a zoanthrope was even harder to kill than a martial arts type. The drawback was that one had to be in a beast state to have such explosive power and recovery. But maintaining the beast state consumed Esper energy, so there was naturally a time limit. Odiri was far from reaching that limit, but being injured like this, constantly healing wounds, was naturally accelerating his Esper energy consumption. This gave rise to a strong sense of worry. When would his Esper energy run out? For the first time, He felt the fear of death. Who wasn't afraid of death? The little Japs were always talking about committing seppuku, making them seem so tough, but if they truly weren't afraid of death, why did they all try to argue their way out during their trials? It was because they didn't want to die. Otherwise, why surrender at all? Wouldn't it be better for them all to be gloriously annihilated? Odiri was the same. Now that he possessed terrifying power, he naturally wanted to live even more, and he was unwilling to accept it. 1 second the world was his. How did it turn into this situation the next? It was all Wu Shanlong's fault. Why the fuck did you have to kill yourself for no reason? Stupid Huaxiao person. And Xiao Ran. Where the hell did you pop out from? Fucking hell. While Odiri was cursing in his heart, his eyes grew fierce. If this continued, he would be worn down to death. Then he would have to go all out. He let out a great roar, and his 2 wings swung simultaneously, slashing out sharp energy streams. This was aimed at the weakness of Xiao Ran's net ability. But with this slash, his wings went directly into the space gate, and because of the angle, the energy streams he unleashed had no chance of hitting the edges of the space gate, so this attack had no effect on Xiao Ran. But because of this slash, his wings were now inside the space gate. Instantly, a terrifying suction force arose, trying to drag Odiri in by force. How could Xiao Ran miss such a good opportunity? He activated space compression, giving Odiri a helping hand. At this moment, Odiri erupted with terrifying power. He roared, his feet driving into the ground like a pile driver, using this to exert force and resist the pull of the space gate. And yet, his wings were slowly pulling out. A bit terrifying. Xiao Ran sighed inwardly. Indeed, as espers grew stronger, it became increasingly difficult to easily capture someone with the space gate. In the future, there would probably be even more and stronger methods to escape. But not today. Today, Odiri must die. Xiao Ran snorted, tossed a small stone towards the space gate, and then activated space exchange. Whoosh, Odiri and the stone swapped places. Space exchange could only swap positions, not change an object's original state of motion. So the stone continued to fall into the space gate, while Odiri still had his wings sucked into the space gate. Only, his feet were no longer on the ground. You're a zoanthrope type and have wings so you can fly, yes, but now your wings are caught in the space gate, and your feet are not on the ground. How can you resist the suction force of a space gate now? The pressure was on Odiri. Odiri roared again, his voice filled with determination and unwillingness. Then his whole body glowed with a crimson light, his power instantly surging to its peak. With a flap of his wings, he actually managed to break free from the space gate. But he also paid a huge price. With a pop, one of his eyeballs shot out of its socket, pulling with it a mess of blood vessels and nerves, but it exploded before it could even hit the ground. You deserve to die. As soon as Odiri broke free, he shot towards Xiao Ran like lightning. His speed was so fast that Xiao Ran had no time to react. However, Xiao Ran had always been cautious. As long as Odiri wasn't dead, how could he possibly relax or be careless? Odiri had clearly reached Xiao Ran and was about to smash his head with a punch, but his fist swung through and hit nothing solid, passing right through his body. At this point, Xiao Ran finally registered everything, a mocking smile appearing on his lips. His banishment now lasted for over 2 hours. Facing a strong enemy, would he be stingy about using it? When you're dead, you have nothing, so why would he be afraid of wasting Esper energy? His own life was the most important. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and used Space Shatter, once again enveloping Odiri. Odiri forcefully charged out, but in front of him was the space gate, forcing him back again. He wanted to burst with high speed and rush out before Xiao Ran could react. As long as he was far enough from Xiao Ran, he would be the one to sneak attack, and Xiao Ran would have no way to hurt him. But just as he burst with speed, his body suddenly froze. Outside the Space Shatter, there seemed to be an invisible wall. To the left, to the right, and in front, there were such walls. One side was clear, but that was where the invisible net was. Xiao Ran smiled coldly. He had applied space compression outside the Space Shatter. As soon as Odiri charged out, he would be blocked by the space compression. Space compression was pure brute force, so whether Odiri could break through it depended entirely on the comparison of his and Xiao Ran's Esper strength. The result was, they were about the same. And Odiri still thought he could easily rush out in one go. How was that possible? Odiri's top speed was forcefully suppressed to a normal speed. This allowed Xiao Ran to leisurely cast Space Shatter, continuously dealing damage to Odiri. Odiri was already bathed in blood. His internal organs were almost turned into mush by the Space Shatter, and cracks had appeared on his bones. It was a testament to his powerful Esper ability that he was still alive. Anyone else thrown into the space shatter would have been turned into mushy flesh and shattered bones in a second. Odiri was not only alive, but also had the strength to fight back, showing how truly formidable he was. But with such a huge consumption, how long could he last? Odiri let out a mournful roar. Pop! Both his ears fell off his head, and the crimson glow on his body intensified, his speed and strength surging again. Boom! He unleashed a massive burst and instantly broke through the space compression. He no longer had any thought of killing Xiao Ran. He ran and flew, quickly moving away from Xiao Ran. If he kept fighting, he would die. You want to run? Xiao Ran was expressionless. If it were daytime, you might have been able to escape, but at night? With a thick fog, where can you run? Earlier, Odiri had threatened that even if Xiao Ran and Shan Long escaped, he could track them through their heartbeats and footsteps. As long as they were within 500 meters, he would immediately find them. Odiri would just have to follow the sound, and no matter what was in front of him, he could just crash through it. Walls and such were like paper to him, and he could kill his target with a single slash. This was the terror of a zoanthrope type. I'm strong, I'm fast, I'll just be a brute. But now that it was Odiri's turn to flee, it was completely different. How can you locate by sound? Oh, by listening to Xiao Ran's heartbeat and footsteps, and then crashing towards them? Is that still called escaping? Then, what if he just runs straight ahead? Sorry, but without being able to see, humans cannot maintain a straight line for long. They will inevitably go off course, either in a serpentine path or just going in circles. Why does everyone become helpless once the fog sets in? Isn't it because of this? Odiri's speed was fast, but Xiao Ran wasn't worried that he could get away. However, he really should kill this little Jap quickly, otherwise. Xiao Ran looked down, and the change was already very obvious. Fighting a battle while having a massive erection gave off a strong sense of perversion. Xiao Ran used space exchange to advance rapidly, while using space perception to track Odiri. It had to be said, this little Jap was truly strong. An ordinary person blindfolded would deviate from their path within 10 meters, or even go in circles, but Odiri actually ran for nearly 7 kilometers before his path started to curve. If he received some training in this area, could he really maintain a straight line with his eyes closed? Maybe, but at least not now. Xiao Ran sneered. As long as you deviate, your speed advantage is gone. Prepare to die. Sure enough, the arc of Odiri's run became larger and larger. He had clearly been running for a full 10 minutes. At his speed, that amount of time was enough to get from Haidu to Sioux City or even Shi City. He rushed into a building and finally stopped. He needed to recover. 2 self-mutilating bursts of power, although they got him out of a dangerous situation, also came at a great cost. He had lost an eye and both ears, his muscles were like paste, and his bones were covered in fractures. If he didn't stop to recover, he might just fall apart into a pile of minced meat and broken bones while running. By now, he should be far away from Haidu, at least in Sioux City. That bastard couldn't possibly catch up to him. He sat down with a plop, panting heavily. How tragic. During the day, he was the undisputed top power in Haidu, with a chance to become the strongest in all of Huaxiao, or even the world. But what was the result? Now he was being chased, reduced to a one-eyed, earless monster. Bakiru. Odiri couldn't help but curse. He was about to lie down and rest when his eyes swept around, and a look of horror appeared on his face. This was a massage parlor, and on the wall was a sign. Haidu police remind you that prostitution, gambling, and drugs are all illegal and criminal activities. Haidu. What the fuck? How is he still in Haidu? No. Even if he was still in Haidu, after running for so long, Xiao Ran should have lost him. Relax, He suddenly felt a strong sense of crisis. The next second, he rushed out, but just as he did, he strangely appeared outdoors. Space shatter enveloped him again. Odiri's unhealed injuries worsened, and he almost disintegrated on the spot. His life force was too tenacious. A powerful life-giving energy held his physical body together, preventing it from immediately falling apart. Odiri fought his way out of the space shatter, but as expected, he once again met with powerful resistance. Space compression. Damn it. Odiri wanted to both curse and cry. As long as he was blocked by space compression, his body would be destroyed by space shatter. The only way to break through was with a self-mutilating burst. But the problem was, even if he was willing to lose a nose, a set of teeth, or even his other eye, each burst would cause an intense impact on him. He could only do it a total of 3 times. After 3 times, the consequence of another burst would be exploding and dying. So, He held his last life-saving card. How did things get to this point? He had killed two major experts, Shen Mingfei and Ying Guanghao. He should have held an absolute advantage. He had even killed almost all of his own subordinates, so his advantage should have been even greater. But what was the result? How did he end up in such a miserable state? Despite his thoughts, he used his last burst of power without hesitation. Pop! His other eyeball also fell out and immediately burst. He was blind, but it didn't matter. The fog was thick now, so even with eyes, he couldn't see anything. Run! He charged out recklessly, bang, bang, bang. Walls were shattered by his impact. Even if a huge rock stood in his way, it would only be sent flying or shattered by his charge. Xiao Ran was in no hurry. Odiri had just become blind and was far from adapting. Otherwise, he might have really been able to walk in a straight line. And for now, sure enough, after charging for a distance, Odiri went off course, and then more and more so. On a map, he had actually traced a figure 8, almost returning to his original position. When Odiri couldn't hold on any longer and had to stop to rest, Xiao Ran quietly arrived. That sense of danger came again. Blood was still dripping from Odiri's eye sockets. His whole body was emitting high heat, so the blood hadn't frozen but had dried, making him look very scary. But what was even more chilling was the ferocity and despair on his face. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Odiri cursed loudly. He had worked so hard for so long, constantly plotting and scheming, only for it all to pave the way for this hateful bastard. And his wife and daughter had also been defiled by this bastard. Thinking about the ways he himself tortured women, Odiri gritted his teeth in hatred. Why did Huaxia have such a person? It would have been so much better without him. Odiri desperately fought against the space shatter. He opened his blade domain to resist, but the blade domain and this space shatter were two completely different things. They didn't interfere with each other, leaving this super ability he had only recently obtained with no room to be used. You damn Huaxia person, I curse you, Odiri said miserably. At least half of his teeth were gone due to the space shatter, and his words came out with a lisp. Xiao Ran chuckled. Wasn't that curse master scared away by you? You don't have that kind of skill. What's the use of cursing? To kill someone, you have to use physical means. Otherwise, would bad people still need to be punished by the law? Now that the law was useless, let me be the one to wield the blade. Odiri fought back with all his might. He really didn't want to die, filled with an intense desire to live. But reality was completely indifferent to his thoughts. As his Esper energy was continuously consumed, Odiri's 10 fingers first broke off one by one. Then chunks of flesh fell from his body, clearly revealing his bones and organs. Then, those organs erupted from his abdominal cavity. Dead, and he died as a pile of rotten meat. Odiri was finally dead. Xiao Ran surprisingly didn't feel happy or excited, only a sense of relief and ease. Shan Long hadn't died for nothing. Too bad Odiri was completely pulverized. There was no way to take his head to pay respects to Shan Long, Wang Tai, and the others. Consider yourself lucky, Xiao Ran said coldly, and fighting back his disgust, he pressed down. Instantly, a warm current flowed in. It was incredibly turbulent. Odiri's Esper energy was definitely not less than Xiao Ran's, and might even have been slightly higher. That was over 20,000 units, which instantly made Xiao Ran feel like he was going to explode. Fortunately, he was also a big shot at the 20,000 unit level. Otherwise, he might have really been burst to death. But he had already been pushed to his limits by the side effects of absorbing Esper energy. How could he handle another wave of this? He had to find someone to vent on, or he would explode. Whoosh! Xiao Ran used space exchange and quickly approached the hotel where Odiri's wife was. This wave was definitely fierce beyond measure. If Shu Ruaji had to bear it alone, even as an Esper, it would be useless. She would definitely be played to death. But a Jap? That didn't matter. Xiao Ran was no saint with misplaced sympathy. So what? Are ordinary people innocent? They were on Huaxia's land, enjoying the comfortable conditions that Odiri provided for them. This was all from sucking the flesh and blood of his countrymen. How could they be innocent? Taking a 10,000 step back, even if they were innocent, so what? The little Japs were always stirring up trouble, never reflecting on the mistakes of their invasion, but instead building temples and monuments for warmongers and butchers. What the hell was that? If he didn't have the ability, then fine, but now that he did Xiao Ran still need to be polite? By dawn, both of them were like they were dead. Not dead, but close. Xiao Ran left in a grand manner and returned to the Zheng'an settlement. There was only one person there now. Shu Ruaji. Whoosh! Xiao Ran's figure flashed and appeared beside Shu Ruaji. Xiao Ran. Shu Ruaji immediately threw herself into his arms. I was so worried. She knew what Xiao Ran had gone to do, so she was especially worried. Xiao Ran smiled. It's okay, it's okay. Shu Ruaji hugged him tightly. In such an apocalypse, the weak were very prone to developing a dependence on the strong, and after having the most intimate relationship, this dependence would naturally deepen. The sun was high in the sky. Shu Ruaji was both satisfied and a little scared. Don't worry, it won't happen. Xiao Ran patted her. There are plenty of sisters at home. You're not fighting alone. Could this phrase even be used like this? Shu Ruaji rolled her eyes at him, but on one hand, she had no right to object, and on the other, what Xiao Ran said was true. How could she possibly monopolize such a fierce man? Xiao Ran got dressed, ate with Shu Ruaji to fill his stomach, and then he still had her stay here while he went out to find Ozawataro. This little Jap's ability was cursing, which was still quite troublesome. Killing from a distance was truly bizarre, even unstoppable. Right now, he still needed a medium to cast his curses. What if his Esper ability leveled up a few more times? Could he kill without a medium? At that time, if he launched a curse from halfway across the globe, who could withstand it? Even if you knew it was Ozawataro's doing, could you find him? Right now, Ozawataro wasn't too strong, and he had lost a life to both Xiao Ran and Odiri, so this should be the best time to kill him. Otherwise, one day he might have his substitute bodies placed in the Eastern Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, and the Northern Hemisphere. How would you kill him then? I have to find him. I have to find this last little Jap. Finally, there were the 5 generals sent out by Odiri. Duan Chong was already dead, so there were still 4 left. But he didn't know where they had gone, so there was nothing he could do about it. He could only kill them if he met them by chance in the future. Xiao Ran went out, and his space perception expanded. Even after absorbing Odiri's Esper ability, the maximum range of his space perception was still maintained at a 10-kilometer radius, but its microscopic detail had further improved. Before, it was at the micrometer level, but now it had leaped into the nanometer level. Of course, the unit was probably still in the hundreds of nanometers, not yet at the level of tens or single-digit nanometers. If you were to look at a CPU now, you probably still wouldn't be able to see every single transistor. Xiao Ran shook his head. What was the use of this kind of microscopic enhancement? To design chips in the future? Or to become a physicist? Or even handcrafting a nuclear bomb? Xiao Ran muttered. His physics was a mess, but if he could really achieve atomic-level insight, coupled with the help of abilities like space compression, it seemed that handcrafting a nuclear bomb wasn't entirely impossible. But what's the use of this in a fight? He really couldn't think of anything. Is the potential of space perception already tapped out? Xiao Ran felt it was a pity. If the range of space perception could expand indefinitely to cover the entire world, he could sit comfortably at home while everything that happened in the world would be under his control. Alas, what a pity! Xiao Ran sighed. Suddenly, his eyebrows shot up, and a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. A golden snowflake had appeared. Xiao Ran immediately used space exchange. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After a few exchanges, he appeared in an open area. This was already by the seaside, and the surroundings were completely empty. Snowflakes fell like pure moonlight, and among these snowflakes, one of them flickered with a golden luster. If I didn't have space perception, I would have definitely missed it. Xiao Ran looked up at the sky, activated space exchange, and whoosh, a small stone in the plate in his hand turned into a golden snowflake. Judging by the size of the snowflake, it was only half the size of the one Shu Ruaji had absorbed, maybe even less. Shu Ruaji currently had about 6 units of Esper energy, so the Esper energy contained in this snowflake was probably only about 2 units. Very little. Xiao Ran didn't rush to absorb it, but instead conducted an experiment. The snowflake landed on the plate, but it was not absorbed. But when a golden snowflake landed on a person, it disappeared immediately. Does this mean the golden snowflake can be preserved? Xiao Ran continued to observe. After a few minutes, he keenly noticed that the Esper energy in the golden snowflake was decreasing. The rate of loss was not fast, but it was indeed decreasing. The microscopic level space perception had come in handy. Xiao Ran was speechless. Is this its only use? He didn't let the golden snowflake continue to lose Esper energy, but instead stored it in his alternate space. Weren't there still a few women at home who hadn't awakened their Esper abilities? This could allow them to awaken with 100% certainty. Has this overwhelming fortune finally fallen upon me? Xiao Ran smiled, but soon his expression turned serious again. Ozawataro had not been found yet. Moreover, this person's ability was special. His combat power wasn't very strong, but he was particularly hard to kill. After killing him once, he could essentially resurrect in another place. He had to be killed several times. It should only be a few times, right? Otherwise, this guy would be too monstrous. If he really is unkillable, then I'll just lock him up until he dies of old age. Xiao Ran continued his search. Under his space perception, within a 10-kilometer radius, he could take in everything. After walking for a while, Xiao Ran found igloos on the ice surface. Igloos on the sea, at least 7 or 8 kilometers from the coastline. He was stunned for a moment, thinking he had suddenly arrived at the North Pole and encountered Eskimos. There were people in every igloo, with basins of animal fat burning inside. Coupled with the unique insulating effect of the igloos, the temperature inside could be maintained at around 0 degrees. The people inside, wearing winter clothes, could basically withstand the severe cold. They're quite experienced. Xiao Ran walked past, his space perception sweeping over the survivors one by one. Unfortunately, there were basically only young people, no elderly, and no children. These two age groups indeed had a hard time surviving in such a cruel world. But if there were no children, even if humanity survived for a few decades, wouldn't they eventually go extinct? No. With humanity's resilience, as long as they found their footing, they could reproduce and thrive. This cold snap just came too suddenly, and humans were too dependent on modern things like electricity and gas, which was why they were in such a mess. But once they adapted, humans would definitely be able to persevere. It's not like there haven't been cold snaps in history, but humanity didn't go extinct. At that time, humans were still in a primitive stage. Now, at least, a large number of modern tools remained. And espers. So, there should be new life born within a year or two. These new lives, born into such a cruel world, those who could grow up would naturally all be elites. However, there was no Ozawataro in the igloos. Xiao Ran was about to leave, but he put his foot back down just as he lifted it. He saw a person. She broke through the ice from the sea, wearing only a bikini. Her skin was snow white, her hair was golden yellow, and the bikini was bright red, creating a sharp contrast. What was exaggerated was that she was actually carrying a large fish that was at least 3 meters long. Its weight should be far greater than her own, but she managed to drag such a large fish out of the sea and leap out of the ice. This explosive power was quite astonishing. Could she be an ordinary person? Xiao Ran used his space perception to take a look. This was clearly a foreign girl, about 175 centimeters tall, with big blue eyes, a high-nosed bridge, and bright red lips, fitting Xiao Ran's impression of a foreign girl. Sexy. But this foreign girl was truly very beautiful. Even someone as picky as Xiao Ran had to give her a score of 90. And this was without any makeup. She also had a swan-like long neck, white and smooth, followed by delicate collarbones, and then a full bust wrapped in a bikini. It was really big, the thin fabric unable to cover its roundness and height. Further down, her willow-like waist was slender, truly a case of slender branches bearing large fruit, and then a full, pert bottom like a full moon, so round and full it made one's eyes pop out. Below her full bottom were 2 long legs, white and straight, looking as if the legs alone were 2 meters long. This was a top-tier beauty with a composite score above 90, possibly even 93 or 94. The key was that she was a foreigner. Xiao Ran was stunned for a moment, and then that was it. He had top-tier beauties with scores above 95 at home. He just hadn't been with a foreign girl before, so it was a bit novel. What he was marveling at was that this foreign girl was not only an esper, but also a zoanthrope type, and her beast form was a fish. She had webs between her fingers, and when she just left the water, her 2 feet were also joined together like a fish's tail. They only separated and returned to their jade-like feet after she was out of the water. A mermaid. No wonder she could go into the sea. Otherwise, would even an earth or fire attribute esper dare to dive into the unfathomably deep and unknown sea? There were espers and mutated beasts on land. So what about in the sea? The key was, land creatures could find places to hide from the poisonous hail, but what about sea creatures? When the hail fell into the sea, at least initially, it would all dissolve into the water. Did all the creatures in the sea have to start evolving? After so many days, those who should have successfully evolved would have succeeded, those who failed would have died, and 10% would have remained the same, if the ratio was the same. So, the entire sea was naturally extremely dangerous. This foreign girl was really brave, daring to go into the sea to find food, and the key was that she found it. Xiao Ran was intrigued for a moment. Then he withdrew his attention. Find Ozawataro. Splash. The sea stirred, and a huge creature suddenly shot out from the hole in the ice that had just been broken. Because it was too large, it directly expanded the hole made by the foreign girl by more than 10 times. A dragon? A lobster? Xiao Ran was about to leave, but stopped again. It really was a lobster, a Boston lobster, with 2 huge claws. Its body was about 12 meters long, and its 2 large claws were also 9 meters long. Obviously, this large lobster had mutated and evolved. Otherwise, how could it grow into such a behemoth? This big guy immediately swung its giant claws at the foreign girl. Fast, accurate, and ruthless. Xiao Ran scanned it with his space perception. This large lobster was not strong, only about 10 units, but the foreign girl was even weaker, at most 5 units. So, unless the foreign girl's ability countered the large lobster, she would definitely lose this battle. This was the first time Xiao Ran had seen a mutated beast from the sea, and he couldn't help but be curious. He turned around to watch the show. Just a few minutes wouldn't delay him. The foreign girl versus the giant lobster. The giant lobster's Esper ability was clearly water attribute. With a swing of its claw, an icy aura erupted, and the ambient temperature plummeted by more than 20 degrees. The foreign girl, on the other hand, was a zoanthrope type with excellent strength and speed, allowing her to dodge in time. If your Esper level isn't high enough, you make up for it with ability, and being fast is an ability. But the result of this was, the foreign girl's stamina was being consumed too quickly, and she couldn't last long. She fought while retreating towards the igloos. It was clear there were other Espers there, and she was going to seek help. No need for such trouble. Xiao Ran ran at full speed, charging towards the battle. How fast was he now? He had absorbed over 44,000 units of Esper energy. Converted to a martial arts type, he should be comparable to a 4,000 unit master, right? Even Duan Chong back then wasn't this strong. Of course, he had absorbed a large amount of Esper energy just yesterday, and it would take another 2 days for his physical body to be fully enhanced. But right now, he should be at least comparable to a 1,000 plus unit martial arts type. What did that mean? A distance of 2 kilometers was just a matter of a few seconds for Xiao Ran, and this was without him going all out. Because his speed exceeded the speed of sound, his arrival was silent. But behind him, a terrifying sonic boom roared. Bang, 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 the ice and snow on the ground all exploded, the destructive power extremely astonishing. Xiao Ran had already reached the giant lobster and threw a punch. Bang! The giant lobster didn't even have time to react before its thick shell was pierced, and its entire brain was pulped. A martial arts type of the same level was just that dominant. No fancy skills, just immense strength. Brute force was all that was needed. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. He had been pretending to be a martial arts type before, but now, even if he appeared as one, he was an absolute master. Once his body had fully digested the Esper energy, he would only be slightly inferior to the initial Odiri. Odiri probably only had 5,000 units of Esper energy at the beginning, right? Maybe even only 500. However, out of his usual caution, Xiao Ran added a space cut and held banishment in his hand, ready to cast it on himself at any moment. He was on the sea surface now, and who knew what terrifying creatures might be lurking in the sea below? The kind that could evade his space perception. Just because he hadn't encountered one before didn't mean he wouldn't in the future. I'm only the number 1 in Haida City. Can I be proud? The giant lobster crashed to the ground. It had died a worthy death, first being punched by a master equivalent to 4,000 units of a martial arts type, then having its brain cut by a 40,000 unit space type master's Esper ability. TSK, it only had 10 units. They really thought highly of it. It was a worthy death. The foreign girl was stunned at first, then became wary. After all, everyone was in danger now. Who wouldn't be wary of a stranger? People like that should have all died long ago. Then, she cautiously said, "Thank you. No need. I just wanted to eat some seafood," Xiao Ran said, trying to sound cool as he grabbed the giant lobster and started to walk away. The goal of this trip was to find and kill Ozawataro, not to pick up girls. He could do that later. Foreign girls weren't rare, but such a beautiful and sexy one. TSK. The foreign girl watched him walk a few steps, then seemed to wake up from a dream and shouted, "My name is Leah Amirs. What's your name?" Huh. Her Chinese is quite standard, saves me the trouble of getting a translator. Xiao Ran turned his head and gave her a bright, sunny smile. Xiao Ran, the Ran from Ran Xiao, burning. He even deliberately emphasized it. Leah couldn't help but take a step forward. "Will we meet again?" "If fate allows, of course we will," Xiao Ran said without looking back, walking further and further away. Leah didn't chase after him. Instead, She picked up the large fish she had caught and headed towards the igloos. She believed that she would definitely have a fated encounter with this Huasha man named Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran walked some distance, and after confirming that no one could see him within a 10-kilometer radius, he stored the giant lobster in his alternate space with a thought. He could finally taste some mutated seafood. Such a big one. How much meat did it have? Before, he would order a Boston lobster, and one person could finish it in a few bites. Now, with such a big one, how many people could it feed until they were full? The sea was truly the cradle of life, providing such abundant food. However, could mutated creatures be eaten? They probably could. Xiao Ran pondered, I'll find someone to test for poison, and after confirming it's not poisonous, I'll eat it. And I have to let someone else taste it first. If it doesn't taste good, then forget it. I can use it to be a good person in the future, give it to someone. After all, you can't say I'm bad. I gave you food. But if you say I'm good, the taste is just terrible. He continued his search, and soon, a large area of buildings appeared ahead. This is a university. Xiao Ran used his space perception to scan the university sign under the snow and couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. This was a university he couldn't get into back then. But I'm in now. Xiao Ran moved through the school. His space perception covered a 10-kilometer radius, so he just had to walk straight ahead. He could completely scan the entire school in one pass, ensuring there were no blind spots. Even if you were hiding underground, he could find you. There's still a few students here. Xiao Ran didn't cause any extra trouble. His space perception swept past them. As he was about to leave the university, a smile appeared on his lips. Found him. Ozawataro was here. TSK. This little Jap looked like a shut-in, but he was the most cunning one. His magical death substitution technique could exchange his body with a strand of hair. Of course, it could only be passively activated in a life-threatening situation. But in theory, wasn't it safest to place these substitute dolls at the Black Dragon Society's base? But now, Ozawataro had appeared in university. Obviously, Ozawataro was wary of Odiri, which was why he had separated his eggs. Otherwise, one blow and they would all be shattered. But Haida City was only so big. With Xiao Ran's speed and the vast area covered by space perception, how long would it take him to search the entire sea? A 10-kilometer radius. That was over 300 square kilometers of coverage. Xiao Ran approached quietly. Ozawataro himself was not difficult to deal with. His only means of attack was cursing. Although his body had been enhanced, could it compare to Xiao Ran's? The tricky part was his death substitution technique. Xiao Ran didn't know how many times he could use it, or where each substitute was. Fortunately, he probably hadn't left Haida City since the Cataclysm. Otherwise, if his last death substitution technique activated and sent him straight back to Japan, that would be a joke. Xiao Ran walked to within 100 meters of Kotaro, Ozawa. That was enough. He activated spatial exchange, and swoosh, the little Jap appeared right in front of him. Kotaro's face instantly twisted into an expression of utter shock, as if he wanted to scream. How could Xiao Ran find me here? I was so low-key, hiding in a damn storage room. I even knew there were other people here and restrained myself from cutting off their thighs. And you still found me. How do you say goodbye in Japanese again? Never mind. We'll see each other later. Xiao Ran sent a spatial cut slashing over. Kotaro Ozawa vanished into thin air, and a single strand of hair slowly drifted down from the sky. Xiao Ran wasn't disappointed in the slightest. He continued his search. He had long anticipated that this little Jap would be hard to kill. With that mental preparation, he was naturally calm and composed. Find him. In theory, Haidu was just over 6,000 square kilometers, and he could cover over 300 square kilometers. That meant he only needed to stand at 20 key nodes to search the entire city. But theory was theory. Haidu wasn't shaped to perfectly match his search standard. It was irregular. Therefore, Xiao Ran needed more nodes to achieve a full search of the entire city. At most it would just double the number. And how fast was he now? A dozen or so minutes later, Xiao Ran found Kotaro Ozawa again. He was actually hiding in the Oriental Pearl Tower. You've got good taste, little Jap. The tower was well over 100 meters tall, so Xiao Ran couldn't use spatial exchange directly. But of course, that was no challenge for him. He threw out 3 stones one after another, then activated spatial exchange. After the first exchange, he was at an altitude of about 100 meters. Another use brought him to about 200 meters. After the third, he had risen to a height of 300 meters. One last use, and he appeared inside the restaurant. Kotaro Ozawa was sitting in a chair, gasping for breath, a look of lingering terror on his face. When he saw the eerily appearing Xiao Ran, he was so frightened he fell backward, sending tables and chairs crashing with a clatter. But he just stared at Xiao Ran, his hair standing on end in terror. How could Xiao Ran have found him so quickly? Did he have some kind of tracking technique? He couldn't help but pat himself down. Had Xiao Ran planted some kind of beacon on him, allowing him to track him down so fast? Otherwise, was there any other possibility? He closed his eyes and offered his neck, ready for the slaughter. But Xiao Ran didn't take his life directly. Seeing how panicked this guy was, his death substitution tricks were definitely not used up. So, I can't let you get away so easily. If you're injured, can the death substitution technique be activated? He was full of curiosity. With a thought, he took out the giant lobster, dug out a piece of meat, walked over, and stuffed it into Kotaro Ozawa's mouth. Did Kotaro Ozawa think he could resist with his meager strength? He was force-fed the meat. Don't you little Japs like to eat sashimi? This is the highest grade. What's there to be picky about? Xiao Ran laughed. After force-feeding him the lobster meat, he watched for any adverse reactions before deciding whether to eat it himself. Then he took out a kitchen knife. You really like cutting people's thighs, don't you? Xiao Ran revealed a cruel smile. What do you want to do? Kotaro Ozawa could understand Chinese and speak it, though with a heavy accent. Hith. Xiao Ran didn't answer, just brought the knife down with a chop. Huh? The blow landed, but it failed to sever Kotaro Ozawa's leg. It merely ripped his pants and didn't even break the skin. Instead, the kitchen knife's edge was bent. Damn. Although Kotaro Ozawa wasn't a physical type esper and had no abilities to turn his body into metal or stone, as one of the 3 giants of the Black Dragon Society, he had absorbed nearly 4,000 portions of abilities, or at least a number very close to that. With his body enhanced by so many abilities, he was comparable to a physical type with 400 portions. To what degree had his muscles, bones, and skin been strengthened? A regular kitchen knife was actually less tough than his skin, its blade bending from the immense rebound force. For an esper like this, you'd probably need a blade made of alloy to cut through. If Kotaro Ozawa was like this, what about Xiao Ran? Xiao Ran felt he could probably take a missile head-on, but he would absolutely never do that. Better to be safe. Why bother? I have banishment. Xiao Ran casually stuck the kitchen knife into Kotaro Ozawa's mouth, causing the guy to cry out in muffled pain. Even if it couldn't cut him, how could it not be uncomfortable to have such a foreign object stuffed in your mouth? Kotaro Ozawa kept shaking his head, trying to spit out the object in his mouth, but Xiao Ran held him down firmly. He used spatial cut, delivering 4 consecutive slices that fractured Kotaro Ozawa's collarbones and ankles, yet his skin remained completely unharmed. Now, the little Jap wanted to reach for the knife handle in his mouth, but he couldn't move his hands at all. With his bones broken, how could he lift them? Xiao Ran slapped the knife handle forcefully, and he hammered the entire kitchen knife in, but the blade got stuck in his throat and wouldn't go down. Xiao Ran smiled, activated spatial compression, and plop, the kitchen knife was forced further down, entering Kotaro Ozawa's stomach. The fortitude of a high-level esper was on full display. Despite being tormented like this, Kotaro Ozawa's esophagus didn't even rupture. Impressive. Xiao Ran stopped and waited to see if Kotaro Ozawa would show any signs of poisoning. Waste not, why not? As it turned out, the mutated lobster was probably not poisonous. Xiao Ran waited for an hour, but Kotaro Ozawa showed no signs of being poisoned. His blood was normal. On this point, Xiao Ran, with his ability of microscopic observation, had every right to speak. Of course, dragging it out for so long wasn't just to see if the lobster meat was poisonous. It was also to make Kotaro Ozawa savor the pain. For a pervert like him, killing him with a single cut would be letting him off too easily. You have many lives, don't you? Hell, we'll take it slow. The more lives you have, the more times you'll be tormented. I want to see if you'll end up regretting having so many lives. With a thought, Xiao Ran activated spatial exchange, swapping a rock in Kotaro Ozawa's stomach with one outside. The rock in his stomach was only slightly larger than a fist, but the one swapped in, it was bigger than a human head. With that, Kotaro Ozawa's belly practically exploded. Kill me, he cried out indistinctly. Xiao Ran looked at Kotaro Ozawa's enormous belly and smiled. What's the hurry? Isn't it nice to let you experience the feeling of pregnancy? I'm a prophet. You're pregnant with twins. Xiao Ran used spatial exchange again, and another small rock in Kotaro Ozawa's stomach was replaced with a large one. Kotaro Ozawa was in so much pain that his whole body trembled, curling into a ball. Continue. Xiao Ran said coldly, continuously using spatial exchange. Kotaro Ozawa's belly grew larger and larger. If an ordinary person were tormented like this, their stomach would have burst long ago, but an Esper's body was too tough. Even when his stomach and belly were stretched larger than a water vat, they stubbornly refused to break, causing only immense pain. Even if Espers had terrifying digestive abilities and could truly grind down rocks, the time was too short for Kotaro Ozawa to do so. Besides, wasn't Xiao Ran constantly swapping in new goods? How could he possibly manage it? Continue. Xiao Ran took out rebar, iron blocks, and the like. Now, unless Kotaro Ozawa's stomach acid was comparable to a xenomorph's, he would never be able to digest these things. Seeing these items, Kotaro Ozawa's eyes bulged, a look of even greater terror on his face. Hiv. Xiao Ran activated spatial exchange. 1, 2, 3 times, and bang, Kotaro Ozawa's belly finally couldn't take it anymore and exploded. But even with his belly burst, an Esper's life force was tenacious. Kotaro Ozawa did not die immediately. This naturally made him suffer even more. You demon, you will die a horrible death. Kotaro Ozawa could finally speak. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and stepped on Kotaro Ozawa's head with his shoe. That's right. To you little Japs, I am a demon. Don't worry, you won't be the only one to taste this kind of suffering, nor will you be the last Jap to die at my hands. When I get a bit stronger, I'll take a trip to your island nation. I'll slaughter until rivers of blood flow, until corpses cover the fields. Back then, you killed 35 million of our ancestors. After so many years with interest, it wouldn't be too much for me to kill over 100 million of you, would it? Over 100 million. That would be enough to wipe the nation of the little sunrisers off the face of the earth. Maybe I'll leave a few Sakura girls. After all, it's a big country, there must be a few top-quality ones. Kotaro Ozawa stared at Xiao Ran, muttering, cursing Xiao Ran in Japanese. He was using his curse ability. Even without a medium, he could still activate a curse, but its effect would be greatly diminished. Otherwise, his ability would be too useless. However, it had no effect on Xiao Ran. He was using banishment, after all. In the end, Kotaro Ozawa unwillingly breathed his last. A strange scene occurred. His entire body suddenly vanished, replaced by a shredded strand of hair. Interesting. When killed by being swallowed by a spatial gate or by spatial cut, the hair Kotaro Ozawa left behind was whole. But when he was cut in two by Odiri's blade, the hair he turned into was in 2 pieces. And now, it was as if it had been chopped into hundreds of pieces by a knife. So, the hair could reflect Kotaro Ozawa's state at the time of death. A death substitution that even substitutes the injuries? This was great. He could play again. Little Jap, are you hiding well? I'm coming to find you. Xiao Ran laughed and leaped out of the tower. The search began anew. How long would it take? Just 15 minutes later, Xiao Ran found Kotaro Ozawa again. Sure enough, the man was alive and kicking, without a single wound on him. This death substitution technique was truly a great ability. Unfortunately, Kotaro Ozawa's own strength was not strong enough, which meant the technique couldn't be used to its full potential. Instead, it only caused him to suffer several more times. This time, Kotaro Ozawa didn't hide. He was sprinting wildly across the snow, heading toward the sea. He was clearly terrified of Xiao Ran. Was he trying to run directly back to his island nation? It was quite possible. The temperature was so cold that the sea surface was frozen. The distance from Haidu to the island nation was only about 1,000 kilometers. With an Esper's formidable stamina, running this distance was no problem at all. He could even do it in a day. He was truly terrified of Xiao Ran, his only thought being to escape. Swoosh! Xiao Ran's figure flickered, appearing eerily and abruptly in front of Kotaro Ozawa. That's not very nice of you. We were having such a good time. How could you run off on your own? Xiao Ran put on an angry look. Are we not good friends anymore? Kotaro Ozawa trembled uncontrollably. Although his injuries were fully healed, the psychological trauma was larger than the moon. He had even completely lost the courage to resist. Facing such a terrifying enemy, what else could he do but wash his neck and wait for death? This time, Kotaro Ozawa died quickly, but the pain was by no means less. To put it simply, Xiao Ran first inserted a chopstick into Kotaro Ozawa's chrysanthemum region, then successively exchanged it for a screwdriver, a rebar, a stone lion, a tank. The final scene was quite spectacular. A tank-bursting chrysanthemum, TSK. With Xiao Ran's current power, he could probably exchange not just a tank, but an aircraft carrier. Kotaro Ozawa disappeared, replaced by another strand of hair, shredded to pieces. How many more times can you substitute death? It doesn't matter. The more times you substitute, the more painful your death will be. Xiao Ran didn't care in the slightest. He was even a little curious to see where Kotaro Ozawa's limit was. Find him. Another dozen minutes or so later, Xiao Ran found Kotaro Ozawa's corpse. There were no signs of a struggle. He had clearly committed suicide. Kotaro Ozawa had understood that he could not escape Xiao Ran's pursuit, and once he fell into Xiao Ran's hands, the pain was worse than death, making him regret coming back to life. He chose suicide. He must have also used up all his death substitutions. With no hope of survival and facing unbearable torture if caught by Xiao Ran, he was truly at a dead end. Xiao Ran first scanned with his spatial perception, finding that the man's life signs were gone, his heart was no longer beating, and his cells had lost their vitality. This didn't seem like a feint, but to be safe, he still used spatial cut a few more times. Dead for sure. He walked over, placed a hand on him, and a warm current flowed in. Kotaro Ozawa's Esper energy was around 4,000 portions. Since spatial perception, the most accurate measurement tool, had solidified at a 10-kilometer range, Xiao Ran couldn't determine the exact amount of Esper energy absorbed through its range increase and could only rely on experience. It was about that number. Xiao Ran thought for a moment and decided to go back to find Shu Ruaji. The side effects would be coming soon. Back. He burst into speed and quickly returned to the Zhenghan settlement. Now, Shu Ruaji was the only person in the entire community, making her seem very lonely. It couldn't help but remind Xiao Ran of when he first met this woman, dressed in a wedding gown, lying in the snow. That sense of loneliness, despair, and cold beauty was unforgettable. Did you get done? Shu Ruaji asked. She knew Xiao Ran had gone to hunt down the little Japs. Xiao Ran smiled and nodded. It's done. But because it's done so, Shu Ruaji's pretty face turned red. She now knew, of course, that Espers had side effects after absorbing powers. But even though she had been intimate with Xiao Ran many times, she still felt a little shy, blushing at the drop of a hat. Xiao Ran loved this coy demeanor of hers. It gave him the thrill of an illicit affair. How can this be a turn-on? I really seem to have become a Chow now. Xiao Ran only said this in his heart, his attention fully focused on the beautiful, flower-like woman before him. Xiao Ran got up and covered Shu Ruaji with a blanket. Shu Ruaji murmured something, wrapped herself in the blanket, and fell into a deep sleep. She was exhausted. Xiao Ran thought for a moment. Of the 6 major factions in Haidu, only Yang Xiuxiu's branch remained. However, Boss Yang had also left Haidu, creating a huge power vacuum in the entire city. But without the 6 major factions, new 6 major factions would surely emerge in the future. He'd deal with that later. As long as there were no little Japs, everything could be handled slowly. Moreover, the advantage of Espers was like a snowball. The first mover advantage was too important. With Xiao Ran's current volume of Esper energy, it was no exaggeration to say that even if a new king emerged in Haidu and drained all other Espers, they would likely be far from being Xiao Ran's opponent. The number of Espers was a limiting factor, unless golden snowflakes. Xiao Ran rubbed his nose. This was a variable, and there was no telling how many times it had snowed. Thinking back, whether in Suching or Haidu, the level of Espers was abnormal. Suching's main urban area had only 5 million people, which at most could produce 5,000 initial Espers. If all of them were absorbed by one person, the Esper energy would only be about 5,000 portions. But Xiao Ran already had over 7,000 portions when he left Suching. Even subtracting Duan Chang's amount, it was still at the 5,000 portion level. However, not everyone in Suching had completed their evolution, and there were definitely other Espers, so the total should be at least 6,000, maybe even more. Where did the extra Esper energy come from? It could only be the golden snowflakes. Shan Long had obtained golden snowflakes in the early days of the Cataclysm, so the total number of Espers in the world was difficult to judge. I hate variables the most, Xiao Ran sighed. But what will be. It wasn't something he could control. Forget it. Let's go home. Tomorrow, Lu Mei and Tu Xinyue would reach the critical point of their evolution, and the matters here were resolved, so it was best to go back a day early. Xiao Ran released the hovercraft, exchanged Shu Ruaji onto it, and then started the hovercraft back to Suching. The hovercraft was slow, with a speed of only 40 kilometers per hour. Dongshan was in the southwest of Suchong, a straight-line distance of over 100 kilometers. Xiao Ran wasn't in a hurry. Nightfall wouldn't affect him anyway. Nearly 3 hours later, Xiao Ran returned to Qingfeng Garden. At this time, Shu Ruaji also slowly woke up. Upon learning that she had returned home with Xiao Ran, the woman couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Although she wasn't going to meet his parents, she still felt a bit guilty. Would she be interrogated by a group of people? Would they gang up on her, give her a hard time, and isolate her? For a moment, she was filled with anxiety and really wished she could stay in Haidu with Xiao Ran forever. It's fine. They're all very nice, Xiao Ran said with a smile, leading Shu Ruaji off the boat and into the mansion. Honey, welcome B.A. The little green tea was the first to run over. Others would have some degree of reserve, more or less, but only Zhou Junsu didn't care at all, always letting Xiao Ran feel her utmost enthusiasm. The mansion was surrounded by surveillance cameras, so all the women knew the moment the hovercraft appeared. Leopard and his mate also darted out from the neighboring villa, but before they could get affectionate with Xiao Ran, their lecherous master, who only had eyes for his women and not his pets, had already entered the house. Only then did Zhou Junsu see Shu Ruaji, who Xiao Ran was holding by the hand. She immediately realized this was another woman Xiao Ran had brought back and said in her passive-aggressive, green tea tone, "What should I call this big sister? TSK. Honey was only in Haidu for a few days. How did you manage to pick up such a beautiful big sister?" On the surface, she was praising Shu Ruaji's beauty, but underneath, it was full of sarcasm. See, Xiao Ran was only in Haidu for a few days, and you've already latched onto him. Wasn't she mocking Shu Ruaji for being shameless? If Shu Ruaji were a bit dumber or slower to react, she might have let it slide, but she was both well-endowed and intelligent. She immediately tasted the flavor in the green tea's words, and her pretty face changed color slightly. What a show of force! The women in Xiao Ran's house were indeed not to be trifled with. She looked at the stunningly beautiful woman in front of her, whose body proportions were perfect and couldn't find any fault. Her face was almost perfectly beautiful, and her figure was even more so, making even her envious. How could she counterattack? The other woman was indeed here before her. Before the cataclysm, wouldn't her behavior make her a mistress? But now, she couldn't even be considered a mistress. She was number 9? No. Number 10? No. Number 10-something? And that group of beautiful maids hadn't even been counted yet. The other women all wore smiles. When they fought with Zhou Junsu, they would only feel that this little bitch was so passive-aggressive, with every sentence capable of stabbing someone to death. But when used against an enemy, it was surprisingly satisfying for them. Since Xiao Ran had brought the person back, they naturally couldn't object, nor could they deliberately ostracize or drive her away. However, giving Shu Ruaji a show of force to knock her down a peg was quite necessary, lest she become arrogant because of his favor. Here, everyone was Xiao Ran's woman. Su Qingmei walked out with a smile, took Shu Ruaji's hand, and said with a laugh, "Come, I'll take you to choose a room. There's still many empty rooms here." Shu Ruaji followed her in a daze. She had been completely outmaneuvered. Xiao Ran clucked his tongue. Zhou Junsu was rather catty, first-rate at verbal sparring, but precisely because she offended so many people, she could never become the leader of the harem. She couldn't win over the crowd. But Su Qingmei was different. She was the most magnanimous and had an air of heroic spirit. She was impartial in her actions. So, even though she wasn't the oldest, women like Han Yun and Yu Nuantong were willing to follow her lead. With Su Qingmei as the head of the harem, the household should be very peaceful. Otherwise, if it were the little green tea, she would probably end up as a leader with no followers, as everyone would just gang up and oppose her. Very good, very good. Xiao Ran didn't even need to go upstairs. A sweep with his spatial perception confirmed that Lu Mei and the other woman were still in the process of evolving. Unchanged, they should still be due tomorrow. Thinking of evolution, he naturally thought of the golden snowflakes and the creatures in the water. Whether you were willing or not, active or passive, the creatures in the sea had clearly begun a full-scale evolution. If the sea was like this, what about the lakes, rivers, and streams? Xiao Ran would only fully activate his spatial perception when searching for people, because the larger the range of this ability, the more and faster it consumed his power. Being such a cautious person, as long as his safety was ensured, he would of course save power whenever possible. With a thought, he fully expanded his spatial perception. A 10-kilometer coverage range. Qingfeng Garden was already on the shore of Taihu Lake, so expanding his perception like this covered at least 9 kilometers of the lake's area in Xiao Ran's mind. And Taihu Lake was very shallow, with its deepest point being only a little over 3 meters and an average depth of less than 2 meters, a true disgrace to the name lake. Xiao Ran's perception space was spherical, with a maximum detection depth of 10 kilometers, so it could naturally reach the bottom of Taihu Lake with ease. People say that shallow waters have many turtles. Taihu Lake didn't have a particularly large number of turtles, but it really couldn't support very large fish. The depth was a limiting factor, but small fish and shrimp were abundant. Huh. Xiao Ran saw a group of strange fish. These fish were about 1 meter long, their bodies covered in sharp spikes, and mostly white. As a Suching native, Xiao Ran had some knowledge of the 3 whites of Taihu. After a moment's pause, he recognized them. Weren't these white fish? The difference was that these fish were nearly 10 times larger, and the spines on their fins seemed to have evolved and mutated, becoming like a hedgehog's. These were all mutated fish. However, they were not very powerful. On average, one fish probably had the equivalent of 1 portion of Esper energy. Had an entire species evolved collectively? With a thought, Xiao Ran had already used spatial exchange to appear outside the mansion. Then, he broke into a sprint, arriving on the snowy surface of the lake, and soon appeared on the ice above the school of mutated white fish. Spatial exchange. Swoosh, a fish was brought up. This fish was very fierce. It immediately opened its large mouth towards Xiao Ran, revealing densely packed, long, and sharp teeth. It no longer resembled the white fish of the past. It was clearly a piranha. But with a grab from Xiao Ran's hand, the fish became docile. I'll take it back to study. How to cook it to be delicious. Xiao Ran sensed that there were some mutated fish and shrimp in Taihu Lake, but their numbers were too small and their levels too low, at most 5 portions each. It wouldn't amount to much even if he caught them all, so he wasn't in a hurry to harvest them. Back home, he handed this mutated white fish to Wang Lulu. Steamed fish for dinner tonight, and giant lobster. The women were all a little surprised to see such a strange fish and wondered if it was still edible. But as the steam carried out the aroma of the fish meat, their mouths began to water. There was also the lobster meat. Because there was so much of it, it was divided into steamed and garlic flavor versions, both exceptionally fragrant. When it was time to eat, everyone eagerly held their chopsticks, waiting to dig in. One taste, and it was truly fresh. Xiao Ran clucked his tongue. The mutation and evolution of living creatures had certainly made the world more dangerous, but had also made food more delicious. Fresh, tender, and very springy. He had tasted the fish and shrimp, but what about mutated animals? Cattle, sheep, pigs, and the like. Thinking of the deliciousness of this giant lobster and white fish, Xiao Ran's mouth began to water. Right, there should also be mutated plants, which should be equally delicious. Xiao Ran smacked his lips. Besides human evolution, the many delicious foods were probably the only other benefit of this cataclysm. A night passed. In the morning, a ray of sunlight shone on Xiao Ran's face. He was considering a problem, whether to move his home to Tu Xinyue's shelter. In theory, it was safer there, but it was built specifically to deal with cataclysms. It was sturdy and had the necessary survival equipment, but in terms of comfort, it was far, far worse than here. If ordinary bad guys come, almost everyone at home is an Esper. Any one of them could sweep the floor with them. Plus, there's Xiao Chuchio who can manipulate electronic devices, so we're not afraid of sneak attacks. What if Espers come? What's a shelter in the face of an Esper? Thinking this way, moving to Tu Xinyue's shelter was meaningless. It offered no real protection and would only lower their quality of life. Besides, Dongshan was isolated from Sucheng, already desolate with a small population, not much different from Tu Xinyue's location. Forget it, we'll stay here. Xiao Ran made his decision. Today's focus was the evolution of Lu Mei and Tu Xinyue. Whether they could succeed depended on their own fortune. However, the appearance of the golden snowflakes meant that even if the evolution failed, hope was not lost. They just had to find another golden snowflake. Xiao Ran had one in his pocket dimension. But who to give it to? Xiao Ran was still a bit biased. He planned to give his golden snowflake to Yin Qin first. For no other reason than she was beautiful and so good in bed. Her priority was naturally above Zhang Jingya and the other women. Men were just that superficial. Of course, if Lu Mei's evolution failed, then this golden snowflake would be prioritized for Lu Mei. In a word, superficial. In the afternoon, both Lu Mei and Tu Xinyue reached the final moments of their evolution. Xiao Ran multitasked, simultaneously performing 2 surgeries with ease. He was truly too strong now. After absorbing Kotaro Ozawa's power, he was approaching 50,000 portions. He could multitask before, so how could he not be able to now? The 2 women completed their evolution almost at the same time. Both were successful. Xiao Ran breathed a sigh of relief. This was good. He could save a golden snowflake. With a soft moan, Lu Mei and Tu Xinyue opened their eyes one after another. How is it? Xiao Ran asked with a smile. Lu Mei sensed for a moment, then showed a look of confusion. I haven't found any awakened ability. Other than her body feeling a bit stronger, she really didn't notice anything different about herself. Me too, Tu Xinyue also said. Xiao Ran was stunned. That shouldn't be right. They had both clearly succeeded. Were they both physical types? That wasn't right either. The cell strength of a physical type should be far beyond their current state. Their cell strength had indeed increased, so their successful evolution was a certainty, but how could they not feel what kind of ability they had? Xiao Ran was very puzzled. He reactivated his spatial perception to get a detailed understanding of the two women's situation. What exactly had gone wrong? But as soon as he thought of it, he found that the activation of his spatial perception was met with a slight resistance, as if suppressed by some force. However, this force was pitifully small and couldn't possibly stop him from deploying his ability. It was just a moment of resistance, almost imperceptible. Yet Xiao Ran began to ponder. No matter how slight this resistance was, it existed. Moreover, he was a powerhouse with nearly 50,000 portions of Esper energy, so this suppression was insignificant to him. But what if it were only 100 portions, or 10? Everyone, come here, he called all the women, including Su Qingmei, and had them use their abilities. A strange scene occurred. The women were all surprised because their abilities were suppressed. Although those who had absorbed more than 10 portions could still use them, it was noticeably more difficult than usual. For those with around 5 portions, it was completely impossible to use them. There was only one exception. Su Qingmei. She was completely unaffected. Was it because she was a physical type, with all her power used to strengthen her body, so there was no such thing as a superpower? Xiao Ran looked at Lu Mei, because the girl's face was a little pale, as if she had overexerted herself. An idea struck him. He used spatial exchange to send Lu Mei directly to another room, a very distant one. Huh! The women immediately exclaimed in surprise again, because their abilities had returned. They could use them easily, without any difficulty. And Tu Xinyue also showed a look of pleasant surprise. I can feel my ability. What was it? She gave Xiao Ran a charming smile, and instantly, Xiao Ran felt a strong urge rise within him. Holy crap, no way. Hee. I can make people burn with desire, Tu Xinyue said smugly. Her gaze swept over the others, and all the women blushed, either clamping their legs shut or their eyes becoming watery, an air of spring fever filling the room. Holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. Xiao Ran couldn't help but shiver. One teacher you was scary enough. A simple little Xiao Ran. Stand up could make him lose control, forced to be nothing but an exhausted old ox. Now, Tu Xinyue was being blatant, directly turning into a walking aphrodisiac. My waist, my kidneys, my life. Hee. Instantly, all the women started laughing. A truly devilish sight. Flee, flee. Xiao Ran's figure flashed, and he appeared in Lu Mei's room. Your ability is very strange, Xiao Ran said, making Lu Mei's eyes light up suddenly. I guess your ability is to suppress others' abilities, making them unable to use them. That's why only Su Qingmei among the women was unaffected. She didn't have an ability to begin with. Does being physically strong count as an ability? Lu Mei first showed a look of joy, then sighed dejectedly. What's the use of this kind of ability? She envied the abilities of the other women. But Xiao Ran didn't think so. He said seriously, if you use this ability well, it can have a game-changing effect. However, you're too weak right now. You need to be properly trained. And you also need to practice making this suppression ability directional, not indiscriminate between friend and foe. If it wasn't directional, her ability would be greatly diminished. But if it could be, this ability was incredible. One had to know, even a powerhouse like Xiao Ran was affected, albeit very slightly. But what if Lu Mei became stronger? No. Actually, several of the women's abilities were very impressive. For example, teacher used Word of Law. At a critical moment, a simple so-and-so stand-up could, by causing just a tiny bit of influence in a duel between experts, decide the outcome. Right? It was just that teacher you was too weak now. She didn't even need to be deliberately targeted. A random shockwave from a battle could finish her off. The same went for Lu Mei. But using a large amount of Esper energy to make them strong would naturally take away from Xiao Ran's share. There was a trade-off, a point of balance. Xiao Ran rubbed his nose. Forget it. He'd think about it later. Since both Lu Mei and Tu Xinyue had successfully awakened their abilities, Xiao Ran gave the golden snowflake to Yanqin. Sure enough, upon using it, Yanqin entered a state of fever, her body strengthening. Since there had already been 2 cases, Xiao Ran was very relieved and felt he probably wouldn't need to intervene. The little Japs in Haidu had been dealt with. What to do next? Xiao Ran felt a little restless. He used to be a very reclusive person and enjoyed being a homebody because he had his wife and kids at home. But to have him stay at home every day now, he couldn't do it. Just play cards with the girls all the time? As the old saying goes, a little self-pleasure is fine, a lot is harmful, and forcing it leads to annihilation. It was the same with playing with the girls. Although Xiao Ran was an esper and his physical fitness was incredibly strong, he still felt he needed to take it easy. The key was that there were espers all over the world now, and the competition was incredibly fierce. You stand still, but others are steadily advancing. And with unexpected factors like the golden snowflakes, a group of powerful espers could easily emerge. Would he have to kneel and beg for mercy then? Of course, the reality was probably not that exaggerated. After all, Xiao Ran was now a powerhouse with nearly 50,000 portions of esper energy. For a long time, no one should be able to surpass him. Xiao Ran went to Taihu Lake again to catch a mutated white fish. This time, he discovered a problem. The spatial gate couldn't be opened in the water. Why was that? Xiao Ran found it very puzzling. He knew that the spatial gate would stop when it encountered an obstacle, so it couldn't be opened within objects like inside a wall or a human body. But water was such a soft thing, it would move with a push. Why couldn't it be opened in water? Was it because water was a physical entity? Then in theory, air wasn't a vacuum either. It also had gas and even dust. How could the spatial gate be opened in the air? No, I have to be able to open the spatial gate in more places. Xiao Ran went to the edge of the swimming pool and started experimenting. Sure enough, if the spatial gate couldn't be opened in Taihu Lake, it couldn't be opened in the swimming pool either. But this time, Xiao Ran didn't give up. He continued to try. Open for me. Open. He would probably go hunting mutated sea beasts in the ocean in the future. If he couldn't use the spatial gate, he would be missing a major weapon. No, it must succeed. He forcefully tried to open the spatial gate. Instantly, water rushed in, but the edges of the spatial gate were being squeezed. Xiao Ran immediately suffered backlash. Pain, pain, pain. This pain wasn't physical, but mental. He felt something warm in his nose. He touched it and found he was having a nosebleed. This damn backlash. However, Xiao Ran actually showed a look of joy. He had just opened the spatial gate. Although it was small, it had truly succeeded. So, the problem is all with the edges of the spatial gate. The spatial gate itself has no substance. It's just a channel connecting to the pocket dimension. But the edges of the spatial gate are different. They are invisible, but they are physical entities. Last time when Sakurada Keiko punched the edge of my spatial gate, it almost knocked me out on the spot. The backlash was immense. But if I can just overcome this, won't I be even more awesome? If the spatial gate could be forcefully opened within an object, for example, a human body, I could drain all your blood, see if you die or not. Or I could drop things out from the pocket dimension, combined with spatial exchange. How terrifying would that be for ambushing people? So, my direction is very clear now. Continue to temper the spatial gate. Even if it can't become a sphere, as long as it can be opened within objects, it's a huge boost to my combat power. Begin. Xiao Ran didn't even need to use rocks to smash it anymore. The water environment was the best training method. The strange thing was how much water was in the swimming pool. How much pressure could there be? But for Xiao Ran, the feeling of pressure from opening the spatial gate underwater was even greater than being bombarded by falling rocks. It was truly bizarre. Was it just because it was being opened inside an object? Never mind. My goal is to improve the pressure resistance of the spatial gate, with the ultimate goal of shaping it into a sphere. Xiao Ran opened the spatial gate underwater. This time, it lasted a bit longer. He only closed the spatial gate after half a minute. Honey, why are you having a nosebleed? Zhou Junsu walked over. Seeing the blood under Xiao Ran's nose, she was both concerned and puzzled. That's not right. We didn't give you extra goji berries and ginseng today. You shouldn't be over-supplemented. Xiao Ran's face darkened. He said, I'm full of energy. I haven't reached the point where I need goji berries yet. Yes. Zhou Junsu was compliant, not arguing with Xiao Ran at all, but clearly not taking it to heart. This bunch of vixens was really ruthless. If they were afraid he didn't have enough energy, couldn't they just not drain him so much at night? Giving him goji berries to supplement him? Wasn't that like draining the pond to catch the fish? The little green tea carefully checked Xiao Ran and, confirming that he wasn't too weak or over-supplemented, left with her mind at ease. Xiao Ran continued to train. He wasn't going anywhere today. He would practice at home. As long as he could successfully modify the spatial gate, he wouldn't say he was invincible, but he would at least be forever in an unbeatable position. He practiced until evening before stopping. He couldn't skip dinner, after all. After dinner, He continued to practice. He was completely absorbed. Plundering Esper energy required going out to search, but tempering the spatial gate wasn't so troublesome. It could be done at home, and when he got tired of practicing, he could play with the girls. This was called a balance of work and rest. However, when it was past 9 o'clock, he was still practicing diligently. He saw Su Qingmei and the others all run over, some wearing swimsuits, others in nurse, doctor, or flight attendant uniforms. Then, the water was filled with several mermaids, and his surroundings were a kaleidoscope of colors. Xiao Ran's self-control only lasted for 3 seconds. "You vixens," he said through gritted teeth. The women all giggled, looking like their trick had succeeded. A night passed, and Xiao Ran recovered his vitality. After breakfast, he continued to temper his spatial gate. At noon, Yanxin completed her evolution. She was a physical type, so she didn't have any strange new abilities. After confirming this, Xiao Ran went back to his practice. This time, he had to achieve something significant. In a flash, 5 days passed. Interestingly, on the 3rd and 4th days, it snowed twice near Dongshan. One snowfall brought Xiao Ran about 5 portions of Esper energy, and the other about 8 portions. What he sought, he could not find, but it came to him without any effort. This meant there were 2 more Espers in the house. One was Zhang Jingya, and the other was named Yang Nuonyuo, one of the 12 women from Qinghong Building. However, both Zhang Jingya and Yang Nuonyuo were physical types, instantly increasing the number of physical type Espers in the house to 4. And Xiao Ran had also made substantial progress in tempering his spatial gate. Xiao Ran's efforts to polish his spatial gate had finally begun to show results. The gate now had a very noticeable curve. Of course, noticeable was relative to before. The actual angle of inclination was no more than 1 degree, but this was still a huge improvement. The benefit of this was a significant increase in the force-bearing capacity of the spatial gate's frame. Xiao Ran could now easily open the spatial gate in water. However, opening and maintaining the spatial gate in the air consumed no Esper energy, but it was different in water. Esper energy was constantly being consumed, though the speed was not fast and was completely within Xiao Ran's tolerable range. A powerhouse with nearly 50,000 portions. After all, it was a piece of cake. But now that the spatial gate could be opened in water, it still couldn't be opened inside a wall. One step at a time, no rush. Not bad. I can go into the sea now. Xiao Ran smiled. Now, he had a major weapon for his adventures in the sea. Should I go take a look? Xiao Ran's mind began to stir. After all, he had been at home for 6 days and was starting to feel restless. It was too boring at home. Time to go out for a walk. And during these 5 days, Xiao Ran hadn't just been tempering his spatial gate. He had also been studying other abilities. For example, spatial compression. His spatial perception reached a range of 10 kilometers, giving him an eagle-eye ability. Yet he didn't have a super awesome long-range sniping ability. That wouldn't do. So he turned his attention to spatial compression, which could fire air bullets. As his Esper power grew stronger, the power of spatial compression also increased. Xiao Ran combined spatial compression with the sonic rebar, 10-kilometer precision strikes, and with the push of the air bullet generated by spatial compression, a Mach 2 rebar could be accelerated to Mach 10. Students who have studied physics know that if the speed doubles, the kinetic energy quadruples. Therefore, a Mach 10 rebar has 100 times the kinetic energy of sonic rebar. Even at the extreme distance of 10 kilometers, how many seconds would it take for a Mach 10 rebar to travel? Less than 3 seconds. At such high speed, even a sharpened rebar would burn from intense friction with the air, instantly reaching extremely high temperatures. This gave the rebar the added killing effect of high temperature. Just like in a certain anime, at the beginning, everyone fought over the flame fruit, but later, even dogs didn't want it, as everyone became a flame user. Right now it's Mach 10. When I get stronger, I can definitely reach Mach 20 or even more terrifying speeds. At that time, I can just launch a rock, and it will be no different from a missile strike. Over a short distance, air friction wouldn't be enough to burn up a large rock, so this move was completely feasible. I am a human missile launcher. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. Xiao Ran, I'm hungry. Can you give me something to eat? A charming and beautiful voice came through. It was Guo Meiyao from the community, the has-been big star. Xiao Ran just replied with a nasal sound. Please give me something to eat, she asked in a coquettish tone. Although she was starving now, an actress was an actress, and she still got into character, as if she were back on stage. I've also come up with several very fun scripts. Do you want to play the male lead? Oh, this was something new. Xiao Ran thought of the star's beauty. Although she was a bit older, she was still stunning. All right then. Okay, I'm coming. Xiao Ran used spatial exchange, slipping out unnoticed. After 2 exchanges, he was inside Guo Meiyao's villa. About an hour later, the script discussion was over, and Guo Meiyao had successfully obtained a week's worth of food and fresh water. Xiao Ran also helped her fill up the generator's fuel tank, which would last for 7 days. He could actually bring Guo Meiyao back to the mansion, but as everyone knows, the grass is always greener on the other side. Besides, leaving this woman here would give her a sense of crisis, making her rack her brains to come up with scripts so he could have more fun. Collecting energy used to be a daily routine, but ever since his falling out with Sister Qin's group, Xiao Ran had put this task aside. After so many days, he felt a sense of crisis again. What if he ran out of energy? To be born in distress is to die in peace and happiness. No sooner said than done. Xiao Ran went out to collect oil. Since he had already visited all the nearby gas stations, Xiao Ran went directly to Kuanqing and started his search there. With spatial perception activated, everything within a 300 square kilometer area, where the survivors were, where the supermarkets were, where the gas stations were, was all in his mind. Collecting oil was too simple now. With the use of spatial exchange and the opening of the spatial gate, a can of oil went directly into his pocket dimension. After collecting from 2 gas stations, Xiao Ran also dealt with 2 misbehaving espers along the way. Xiao Ran turned and left, hiding his good deeds and fame. His speed was too fast now, and collecting oil was so convenient. He didn't need to dig through snow. With precise positioning and spatial exchange, his efficiency was top-notch. It only took him a mere half an hour to visit all the gas stations, big and small, in Kuanqing. Unfortunately, most of the gas stations had already been emptied of their oil. Even so, his oil reserves instantly increased from 2 years to 3 years. Continue. It was still early, and he had eaten his fill today. He didn't want to go back and be squeezed dry by a legion of women. I need to divide their common front. Otherwise, they'll all unite against him. What Xiao Ran wanted was 100 flowers blooming, with the women scheming against each other, all trying to please him. That way, he could get the greatest enjoyment. This task must and can only be given to the little green tea. No one else could possibly accomplish it, nor could they gain Xiao Ran's trust. It's decided. I'll continue south to Haidu. Xiao Ran collected oil all the way towards Haidu. It was right next door, very close. Kuanqing must have been swept by Duanchang. There were no powerful espers, just a few scattered ones, the strongest having only about 10 portions. Since they weren't causing trouble, Xiao Ran didn't bother with them. He entered Haidu. He had been away for a few days, but everything here was the same. The tall buildings stood, but there were no signs of people, not even a single bird in the sky. Xiao Ran moved through the concrete jungle, as fast as a fleeting shadow. He collected from a few more gas stations, but Haidu had previously had 6 major factions, and they hadn't been idle. Energy was naturally a key target for their collection, so most of the gas stations here had been visited, and when visited, they were inevitably emptied. Xiao Ran immediately moved, running to a residential building. He used spatial exchange, and a chair appeared where he had been standing while he entered a room. In the room, there was only a corpse. Xiao Ran's face turned ugly, because the owner of this corpse was a child under 10 years old. The key was he had been violated before his death. Which beast did this? In these times, 9 out of 10 people were bad. Morality had collapsed, and the law had lost its binding force. The evil in human nature was endlessly magnified. But to lay hands on a child under 10? Xiao Ran was seething with killing intent. Don't let me catch you, or I'll definitely torture you to death. He saw someone. In his spatial perception, a person was walking on the snow. He was clearly an esper. His clothes were not thick, yet he showed no signs of being cold. His face was ruddy, his breathing steady, without a single shiver. This was a man of about 50, with a very scholarly appearance, giving off an impression of being highly educated. Of course, Xiao Ran would never judge a book by its cover, because there were plenty of wolves in sheep's clothing. This person was dragging a black canopied boat. The boat was not large, about 7 meters long. Both ends were covered with thick quilts, providing good wind and cold protection, because there were 7 people on the boat, presumably 3 couples and a single dog. The 3 pairs of men and women were sitting together, huddling for warmth. Having seen Duanchang's phony saintly appearance, Xiao Ran was naturally suspicious of this man first. The key was he had just found the body of a young boy here, and then this esper appeared, dragging a boat full of people. How could it not make him suspicious? Could this person be that beast? It was just that now, People froze solid as soon as they died, making it extremely difficult to determine how long they had been dead. So this child could have been murdered 3 days ago, but it could also have been an hour ago. Time for a test. Xiao Ran used a spatial exchange to arrive downstairs. Just as he was about to walk out, his phone's ringtone suddenly went off. Awkward. The man had obviously heard it and looked towards Xiao Ran's location, his face showing confusion and a trace of vigilance. He must be a physical type, otherwise, from his cell strength, he would have to be a powerhouse with around 2,000 portions. Unlikely. So a physical type was reasonable, with a power of about 200 portions. Did something happen at home? Xiao Ran had no choice but to take out his phone and answer. The reason he hadn't put it in his pocket dimension was that he was afraid something might happen at home, and they wouldn't be able to contact him. However, as soon as he answered the phone, a strange voice came through. Is this Comrade Xiao Ran? It was a woman, her voice quite pleasant, and she sounded very young. Xiao Ran was stunned, and his brows immediately furrowed. Who are you? I am Major Zhu from the 1st Military Region. Are you Xiao Ran? The woman said in a tone that was quite unpleasant. The 1st Military Region? Xiao Ran's brows furrowed even tighter. China had 4 major military regions, each controlling terrifying high-end weapons. Now a woman claiming to be from the 1st Military Region had appeared, and she even called him by his name. It all felt very strange. I am Xiao Ran, Xiao Ran answered first. It was clear the other party already knew his identity, so there was no point in denying it. How do you know my identity, and how do you know this number? The other party was clearly a bit smug, her voice rising a notch. As a national power, we naturally have plenty of talented people. What's so difficult about finding you? All right, probably someone similar to the Esper under Chao Xining who could look up data via satellite. No, wait, it's been a long time. Are those server rooms still powered? Unlikely. Tell me what you want. Xiao Ran said coolly. He didn't like the feeling of having his secrets exposed, so his voice was naturally cold. He even wanted to track the signal and give them a warning. The woman cleared her throat and said, Comrade Xiao Ran, we've heard that you have a large amount of supplies. Now is a special time, and we need you to hand over these supplies to help everyone get through this difficult period. Xiao Ran neither denied nor admitted it, smiling. Heard? Who did you hear it from? Comrade Xiao Ran, we have a reliable source of information. I hope you won't change the subject, said the woman who called herself Major Zhu. Xiao Ran remained calm and composed, smiling. How reliable? The woman seemed a bit exasperated and blurted out. It was Gao Liang's men. Gao Liang told him himself that you had hoarded a large amount of supplies before the cataclysm. What the FCK? Chao Xining, you bastard, I really want to resurrect you just to kill you 100 times over. Xiao Ran had thought his secrets had been exposed by some hacker-like method again, digging up records of his massive pre-disaster hoarding. But it turned out to be Gao Liang's men who snitched. In the end, wasn't this still Chao Xining's fault? Old Chao, oh, old Chao, it's no wonder I always use your name as a disguise. You deserve all the curses you get. Nonsense, pure rubbish. Xiao Ran immediately denied everything cleanly. I say, Comrade Zhu, you can't just believe everything you hear. What supplies do I have? It's just what I've worked hard to collect after the cataclysm, barely enough to get by. Heh, you don't have to act, the woman said in a contemptuous tone. After receiving the intelligence, we specifically verified it. You did indeed have a large amount of hoarding activity before the cataclysm, an extremely considerable amount. Comrade Xiao Ran, these are extraordinary times, and we can use extraordinary measures. Please cooperate, otherwise, damn it. Since you've already checked my background, why bother saying all that? Are you messing with me? Xiao Ran maintained his politeness because he didn't want to fall out with him yet. But you come up demanding my supplies, and you even add a threat. Do you really think I'm made of clay? He switched to a flippant tone and laughed. Don't do that. I hate being threatened the most. I say, Major Zhu, I bought these things with my own money. I didn't steal or rob. Now you want to forcibly requisition them? Heh, in my eyes, that's robbery. What's that saying of ours? Right, friends are welcome with good wine, but for robbers, we have guns. Want to fight? I'll be happy to oblige. The other side was clearly not expecting Xiao Ran to dare to refuse. They were stunned for a moment before saying, you should think carefully, we are the 1st military region. Don't. You can't represent an entire military region. Besides, what time is it now? I highly suspect you are just warlords, no longer a state organization, but a tool controlled by ambitious individuals. Xiao Ran cut her off. I'll put it this way, don't mess with me. Don't provoke me, and we can all talk nicely. Otherwise, everyone has a trick or two up their sleeve. Click. Xiao Ran hung up the phone, his face covered in frost. It was all Qiao Xining's fault, that bastard. He was just living his life peacefully, flirting with girls, picking up chicks. Who did he provoke? Just as he said, he didn't steal or rob. He bought the supplies with his own money. Why should he have to hand them over just because someone said so? Are you all robbers? Xiao Ran's expression was cold. At worst, it would be a fight. Who was he afraid of? What was the point of increasing his strength? Wasn't it to protect himself, his women, and his property? Should he move? Xiao Ran thought for a moment and decided not to make any big moves for the time being. Ever since the clouds cleared and the sun came out, he had been very careful every time he went out. He would either use spatial exchange to travel far away or use the hovercraft, but he had also painted the hovercraft white. To find the hovercraft on such a vast, white snowy plain with a satellite, the difficulty would be immense. So, knowing his phone number was one thing, but finding where he lived was another. Suddenly, the phone rang again. Still not giving up? This time, Xiao Ran didn't even answer, just ended the call directly. But he still didn't put the phone into his pocket dimension. He was afraid something would happen at home, and they wouldn't be able to reach him. Besides, if that so-called Major Zhu was tracking this phone, it would lead them to Haidu. When he went back to Qing Phone Garden in the future, he would just toss the phone into his pocket dimension. And who could track the signal then? It wouldn't even be in this dimension. Then he walked out of the house. The scholarly man outside had been waiting for him for a while. Sure enough, seeing Xiao Ran come out, the man's expression didn't change. He asked with a smile, "Finished with your call?" "Yeah," Xiao Ran also smiled. "Sorry to keep you waiting." "No problem. The most worthless thing now is time," the scholarly man said. "My name is Shuangqi. I used to be a school principal. Now, well, I'm trying my best to save more people." "Good thing. If your name had one character different, I would have to reflect on whether I've been working hard and if my salary has increased over the years." "A principal? That means he often interacted with children. Could he have slowly become a pervert?" Xiao Ran nodded. "My name is Xiao Ran, as in to burn." "Little Xiao. I'm sorry, I'm used to calling young people like that." Li Shuangqi had just started to speak when he quickly apologized to Xiao Ran. "No problem. Just call me Little Xiao," Xiao Ran said. A name was just a name, and besides, the man was over 50. It was perfectly reasonable for him to call him Little Xiao. Li Shuangqi nodded. "You're an esper, right?" Xiao Ran was dressed in thick clothes, making it a bit difficult to tell if he was an esper. Unlike him, who was just wearing a sweater, making it impossible to hide his esper identity. "Yes." Xiao Ran didn't deny it. He asked, "Principal Li, what are you doing?" He pointed to the black canopied boat, a question he already knew the answer to. "There are a few survivors inside, but they are not espers. I found them and plan to take them to my settlement." "There's safety in numbers," Li Shuangqi replied, his expression natural, not at all like he was lying. But back then, Duan Chang also had a sincere face, which even fooled an old fox like Sister Qin. "Isn't it good to live here? There are supermarkets all around, convenient for finding supplies," Xiao Ran said deliberately. Li Shuangqi shook his head. "This is already close to the Black Dragon Society's territory. It's very dangerous." "The Black Dragon Society?" Xiao Ran started acting, a look of confusion on his face. "You don't know about the Black Dragon Society?" Li Shuangqi was quite curious. "Are you not from Haidu?" Xiao Ran shook his head. "I came from Jijiaking." "No wonder." Li Shuangqi nodded. "Let's talk as we walk. I'm afraid the Black Dragon Society's people might come looking for us." So the two of them walked side by side. Li Shuangqi was still pulling the black canopied boat. His stamina was amazing. He was pulling a boat, carrying people, yet it was effortless, as if he were just holding a rope. On the way, Li Shuangqi told Xiao Ran about the Black Dragon Society and also mentioned several other factions in Haidu. But he clearly didn't have much understanding of the overall situation. Not only did he not know that the 6 major factions had all withdrawn from Haidu, he didn't even know there were 6 major factions in total, only saying there were several large factions. Was he really ignorant, or was he playing dumb? Xiao Ran was also probing him. Was this Principal Li a truly good person, or a hypocrite? The two chatted all the way, and Xiao Ran was surprised to find that they had arrived at the seashore. The seashore? Moreover, not only had they arrived at the frozen sea surface, but they were also continuing to walk forward. A little further, and wouldn't that be the ice house where the foreign girl was? That cluster of ice houses was built very far away, more than 10 kilometers from the land. The only reason Xiao Ran had been able to discover it was a whim, when he had specifically walked a little towards the sea, and his spatial perception was able to cover a 10-kilometer radius, which led to the discovery of the ice house cluster. Li Shuangqi had always been very wary of the Black Dragon Society and other factions, so it was understandable that he would choose to build his settlement in such a remote and secluded place. This person was very cautious, but also very smart. Even if the Black Dragon Society was constantly searching for living people to force them to evolve, they wouldn't come here, would they? There was nothing here. Who would come to waste their time? Sure enough, Li Xuanqi walked a bit further, and they saw the stretch of ice houses. This ice house cluster had about 500 houses, some large and some small, all imitating the architectural style of the Eskimos. The entrance was actually below the ice level, requiring one to duck and crawl in. This helped to lock in heat and provide better insulation. It might seem like a small change, but it was the culmination of generations of wisdom for the Eskimos' ancestors to discover such a method. Xiao Ran felt a moment of slight admiration. Through his conversation with Li Xuanqi, Xiao Ran thought it was unlikely that he was the murderer who had tortured and killed the child. But of course, it was also possible that Li Xuanqi was very good at pretending. He wouldn't trust others so easily. By the way, Principal Li, why weren't you suspicious of me being a bad person? Xiao Ran asked. Li Xuanqi smiled. I've been teaching for so many years, I can still tell good people from bad people. Your eyes are clear. Even if you're not a good person, you're definitely not a bad one. You're very confident. It's a pity I didn't take a picture of Duan Chong back then. Otherwise, I'll let you have a look and see if you'd call him a good person or a fake. As they were speaking, a large group of people walked out of the ice houses and came towards them. Principal, everyone greeted. There were many espers, over 100 of them, but their strength was pitiful. The strongest was only around 20 portions. Xiao Ran thought for a moment and couldn't help but chuckle. If one didn't compete, the improvement of espers was actually very slow. Look at the women at home. What level were they at? So, to find someone with 20 portions here, and especially for Li Xuanqi to have reached around 200 portions, was actually abnormal. I brought new companions for everyone, Li Xuanqi said with a smile. He had the 7 people get off the boat, introduced them, and then arranged ice houses for them. There were many empty ice houses here, and new ones were still being built. An ice-type esper was busy at work, able to build one in 10 minutes, extremely efficient. Principal, what about this gentleman? Everyone looked at Xiao Ran. At first, they thought Xiao Ran was also an ordinary survivor, but after so long, Xiao Ran hadn't gone inside to take shelter. He must be an esper, but this guy was too good at pretending. An esper wearing so many clothes. I am Xiao Ran, as in to burn, Xiao Ran said first. He was afraid that if Li Xuanqi introduced him, he wouldn't say it clearly and someone might hear it as the other Xiao Ran, hitting the nail on the head by accident. Although with Xiao Ran's high esper level, he wasn't really afraid of any curse masters here. Why take the risk? A name was just a code name. Everyone greeted Xiao Ran, each one very enthusiastic, as if they were treating him as a companion. Splash! Just then, the ice surface broke, and a mermaid burst out of the water. It was the foreign girl named Leah, holding a large fish, probably a tuna, that looked to be several hundred pounds, but the foreign girl held it as if it were nothing. Leah's back, everyone clapped. Last time it was this foreign girl who went fishing in the sea, and this time it was her again. Are you all relying on this one foreign girl to support you here? The foreign girl also dragged the fish over. Her gaze swept around, and when she saw Xiao Ran, she couldn't help but show a look of pleasant surprise. It's you're back. Yes, it's me, Xiao Ran smiled. Everyone asked curiously, and the foreign girl explained. So he's the kind person you mentioned. It's fate. Everyone exclaimed, their attitude toward Xiao Ran becoming even more enthusiastic. Li Xuanqi took the opportunity to say, Leah, then you could take little Xiao to pick an ice house. Okay. The foreign girl agreed readily. Then she said to Xiao Ran, wait for me a moment. I'm going to change my clothes. She went into an ice house, but came out again after a few seconds. She hadn't actually changed clothes, just put a jacket over her bikini, along with a pair of jeans. The jacket was very loose, covering her impressive bust, but the jeans were tight, unable to hide her too long, straight, and slender legs. But what was most tantalizing was her rear, which was round and full, wrapped tightly by the jeans. That kind of full, sexy figure was unique to Western women, a difference in ethnicity. Xiao Ran was very open-minded. He liked both the graceful charm of Eastern women and was not averse to the curvaceous sexiness of Western women. He admired her for a few moments before retracting his gaze and asking, were you all picked up by Principal Li? He needed to confirm from others' perspectives whether Li Xuanqi was the beast who had poisoned the child. Yes, Leah nodded, and then began to tell her story. My father is a diplomat, and I lived in China for a full 5 years starting from the age of 3, so my Chinese is very good. This time, I was a university graduate planning to travel the world before looking for a job. My first stop was China. I never expected to encounter the cataclysm as soon as I arrived. Thank goodness, I was rescued by the principal and brought here. Xiao Ran was still very curious. Then how did you awaken your ability? Golden snowflakes, of course, Leah replied, as if it were a strange question. Weren't you? Xiao Ran was a little surprised. All the espers here succeeded in evolving through golden snowflakes? Is there another way to become an esper? Leah asked back. All right then. Xiao Ran took a sharp breath. Your luck is a bit too good. No, wait. Do golden snowflakes fall here often? Xiao Ran asked. Yes, at most every 2 days. Sometimes several times a day, Leah replied. This is simply ridiculous. Xiao Ran was speechless. He fought and killed for power, and it turned out to be less effective than these people just lying around. Should he move Su Qingmei and the others here to live? No, he should be the one living here. He alone could monitor over 300 square kilometers. According to what Leah said, how many golden snowflakes could he get every day? 10 portions a day to start? In theory, if I bring a cruise ship over, as long as there is enough energy, I can completely transform it into a luxurious sea palace. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel his heart flutter.